Welcome to Creepy Vibes. We're taking you deep into the heart of Texas Hill Country, where the land is wide. The legends are older than memory, and every abandoned road hides something watching from the shadows. These are not made-up stories. These are 20 true creepy encounters from real people, hikers, drivers, and locals who saw things they still can't explain. Footsteps in dry canyons, figures slipping behind trees, lights that don't belong, sounds with no source. You'll think twice before walking these roads alone, especially after dark. Now here's something strange. Thousands of people watch these videos, but never subscribe. Does it cost anything to subscribe? No. It's completely free. So if you love true horror from forgotten corners of America, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot, and it keeps the terror coming, because once you step onto these back roads, turning back isn't always possible. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Let us know in the comments. Because here, in this part of Texas, night falls fast, and something always follows. Just outside of Fisher, Texas, where the roads narrow into ribbons of cracked pavement and the trees lean in a little too close, there's a stretch of highway locals don't talk about after dark. They call it the backbone, Devil's Backbone, more specifically. Not just because of the jagged spine-like hills that frame it, or the way the road seems to twist like vertebrae in a long-forgotten corpse, but because something lives out there. Something old. Something wrong. Mark Talley didn't believe in any of that. 48 years old, recently widowed, and worn down by too many sleepless nights and microwave dinners. He was the type who scoffed at ghost stories and small-town gossip. He'd grown up in Dallas, built a career in commercial construction, and moved down to San Marcos for his wife's health 3 years before. When cancer finally took her, he buried her ashes under a live oak behind the house they'd bought together. Then he sat in that house for nearly 2 months, not working, not answering the phone, and not bothering to change the sheets on the bed they once shared. The night it happened, he'd gone out drinking at Riley's Tavern in Hunter, a roadside bar half-patched together with tin siding and rust. He hadn't planned to get drunk, but grief doesn't come with a user's manual. By the time the bartender cut him off around 1:30 a.m., he was riding the kind of buzz that makes you feel distant from your own hands, like you're floating 3 feet behind your own body. He figured he'd take the back roads home. He hated the interstate this late. Too many truckers half asleep behind the wheel. So he took FM 32 out past Fisher, winding through the switchbacks of Devil's Backbone. The mist came out of nowhere. 1 minute, the road was clear, and the next, he was driving through a low-hanging fog that swallowed the beam of his headlights. He turned the radio off. The static had grown louder than the music anyway. The only sound was the whir of his tires against pavement and the occasional creak of the frame as he twisted through the tight curves. He never saw the deer. That's what he told the sheriff later. It wasn't a lie exactly. His brain had registered movement, a flicker of white something, sudden and wrong. He jerked the wheel, tires screeching as the truck swerved to the left and slammed to a stop across the center line. His heart hammered in his throat. He sat still for a moment, trying to catch his breath. Then he saw her. She was standing in the road, maybe 20 feet ahead, barefoot and wearing a white dress that clung to her skin as if she'd just walked out of a lake. The fog rolled around her ankles. Her hair hung down over one shoulder, stringy and wet-looking, though it hadn't rained in weeks. At first, Mark thought she might be hurt. A hitchhiker, maybe. Someone from a wreck. Then she smiled. It wasn't a smile like any he'd seen before. It stretched too far, tugging the corners of her mouth past the natural limits of skin and bone. Her teeth were too many, too white, not human. And worse, The smile didn't change. It didn't fade. It just stayed there, wide and awful, as she tilted her head to one side and stared directly into his high beams. Mark hit the gas. The tires spun for a moment before catching traction, and as he roared past her, her head twisted violently, unnaturally. 2. Follow the truck's movement. He didn't see her body turn, just her head, like it was mounted on a swivel with no resistance. He didn't stop driving until he was home. The clock on the dash read 2:03 a.m. when he pulled into the gravel driveway. The house was dark, the porch light still flickering from that storm weeks ago. He slammed the door behind him, locked it, and leaned against the wall, trying to steady his hands. He told himself it was nothing, a drunk hallucination, a dream. But he hadn't felt drunk in that moment. He'd felt cold, sober, and entirely awake. The kind of awake that burrows into your skin and doesn't leave. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he walked out to his truck. There were handprints on the side window, small pale ones. Too small to be his. 5 prints, all smeared downward like someone had dragged their hand down the glass. He didn't tell anyone. Not at first. Not even when the whispers started. It was a week later. He was driving to HEB in Wimberley when he heard it. Just a whisper, soft and brief, like someone exhaling syllables in the back seat. Elaine? His dead wife's name. He nearly crashed into a telephone pole. He stopped the truck, yanked open the door, and checked the back. Empty. Just a blanket and a grocery sack full of beer cans. He sat on the side of the road for a full 10 minutes, trying to make sense of it. Then he drove on, shaking the whole. Way out the next time, it wasn't on the road. He was shaving in the bathroom when he saw her in the mirror. Not a reflection. A shape standing behind him, blurred and shifting like fog inside the glass. The same dress, the same hair, and the same impossible smile. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stood there, inches behind him, watching with eyes that didn't match her face. Her eyes were wide, luminous, and full of something he couldn't name. Hunger, maybe. When he turned around, the room was empty. He stopped shaving after. Let the stubble grow. He didn't see the point. He tried talking to the sheriff a few days later. Sheriff Dyer was an old-timer, a 4th-generation local who believed in God, good dogs, and keeping your boots clean. Mark didn't tell him everything, just the part about the woman in the road. The sheriff listened, nodded once, and said quietly, "She shows up to people grieving. We call her the grinner." Mark had laughed. It wasn't a good laugh. More like something dry and cracked falling out of his throat. The sheriff didn't laugh back. He told him 3 people had gone off that road in the last 10 years, all around the same curve, all after seeing her. One man left a voicemail before. "He died," he said. "She's smiling at me, and I can't look away." They found him wrapped around a cedar tree, eyes wide open, mouth torn at the corners like he'd been screaming when he died. Mark started drinking heavier after that. He stopped driving at night. But it didn't help. The whispers came almost daily, always in the rearview mirror, always just his wife's name, sometimes followed by a giggle, not a child's giggle. Something older, something mocking. And then came the dreams. He dreamed of that road, endless and cracked, stretching into a fog that never lifted. He dreamed of her walking toward him, barefoot, her smile widening with every step. He dreamed of his wife's voice, saying his name, asking why he left her there, why he let her go. One night, he woke up to find muddy footprints in the hallway, small, pale feet. The trail led from the front door to the bedroom. Then they vanished. Mark tried leaving town. Packed a bag and drove north. But after 2 hours on the road, he looked in the rearview and saw her sitting in the back seat, smiling at him through the mirror. He didn't see her in the flesh, just in the reflection. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her mouth opened. Slowly, showing teeth that didn't belong in a human skull. He turned around and drove home. No one has seen Mark Talley in weeks. His mailbox is full. His grass is knee-high. The sheriff went out to do a welfare check but found the house empty. The front door was locked from the inside. The only sign of life was a smudge on the bathroom mirror. A long, dragging smear, like someone had run their hand across it from the inside. Some say Mark finally joined his wife. Some say he left town for good, but the locals know better. They know what happens when you see the grinner. They know she whispers to the broken-hearted. They know she waits on Devil's Backbone, smiling too wide, calling out to the ones who can't let go. And if you drive that stretch of road just past Fisher and find yourself alone in the fog, don't look. In the rear view, you won't like what's looking back. It started like any other long-haul night shift. Cody Ellis had been driving trucks for nearly 18 years, most of them on the same southern Texas routes, Houston to Laredo, Corpus to San Antonio, and always somewhere along Highway 281. He liked the stretch between Pleasanton and Whitsett. It was straight and predictable, with just enough late-night truck stop diners to keep him caffeinated and awake. The night he drove into whatever the hell that was, the air had felt off before he even hit Pleasanton. The air pressure had dropped. Just slightly, enough for his ears to pop as he rolled past the Valero on the north end of town. He'd chalked it up to the changing weather. July heat could do strange things to a man's senses, especially after 12 hours behind the wheel. The highway had been unusually empty. No tailgaters, no headlights in his rear view, no oncoming traffic. That alone should have set off alarm bells. Cody figured maybe it was just one of those rare stretches where he was the only one on the road. Still, he kept his eyes peeled. Truckers always talk about the feeling, that gut whisper that says something ain't right. Cody had felt it before during icy runs up in the Panhandle or when a hitchhiker gave off the wrong kind of vibes, but this was different. This was like driving through a painting. The sky looked real, the road felt real, but it all had a stillness to it, a gloss, like the world had been lacquered over. His CB crackled, just once. A quick burst of white noise that fizzled out before it formed any words. He leaned over, checked the settings, tapped the mic. Breaker 19, anyone out there? Silence. Just a long hiss, like the radio was exhaling. He waited a few seconds, then tried again. Any southbound rigs on 281? I got no signal here. Still nothing. He glanced at his GPS unit. It showed his position as frozen about 2 miles north of Pleasanton. The map wasn't updating, and the signal bars had all gone blank. His phone was dead too. Not powered off, just completely lifeless. Like it had never been charged. He let out a dry chuckle, more of a reflex than amusement. Well, that's a damn first, he muttered. Cody wasn't the type to get spooked easy. He'd seen wrecks, seen people die on the road, seen things. More tragic than scary. But this was different. The road ahead looked normal, but there was a weird clarity to it, like it was too well lit, even though his headlights were the only source of illumination. The double yellow lines didn't blur the way they usually did after miles of focus. They stayed razor sharp, too clean, like they'd been freshly painted just for him. He glanced at the dashboard clock. 2:37 a.m., then the air went dead silent. That's the only way he could describe it. It wasn't just a lack of sound, it was like sound itself had been erased. His tires no longer hummed against the asphalt. The wind noise vanished. Even the subtle creaks and rattles inside the cab were gone. It was like someone had pressed mute on the entire world. And then the CB exploded in static. Cody nearly jerked the wheel. the sudden burst of white noise shrieking like a scream through the speaker. He slapped the volume knob down to 0 heart, pounding. His first thought was electrical interference, maybe a solar flare or some freak malfunction. He flicked the switch off entirely. That's when he noticed the road ahead didn't curve. It just stretched forward, endlessly straight, no exits, no mile markers, no reflective signs. Just blacktop, lined with shoulder weeds that didn't sway, didn't move. Like they weren't real. His palms were sweaty now. He wiped one hand on his jeans, kept the other on the wheel, eyes flicking from the road to the sky. Even the stars looked off. They were there, but fixed, like stickers on a windshield. No blinking, no satellites. Just frozen pinpricks of light. That's... When he heard the voice, it came through the CB, even though it was turned off. Soft. Unmistakably a child's voice. A girl maybe 6 or 7. It wasn't distorted or crackling. It was clear, calm, and right in his ear. "Don't go back." Cody slammed on the brakes. The tires shrieked. The whole truck shuddered to a stop in the middle of the empty highway. He reached for the mic, then stopped himself. The radio was off. He grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment, rolled down the window, and leaned out. No sound. Not even crickets. He sat there a moment, frozen, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in the world. He wanted to turn around, to head back toward Pleasanton, but something in the voice had paralyzed him. Don't go back. It hadn't been a warning. It had been a command. So he did the only thing he could think to do. He put the truck back in drive and kept moving forward. After a while, he saw something up ahead, a shimmer, like heat rising off pavement, except it wasn't hot. It looked like the air itself was folding, bending in waves that didn't make sense. The closer he got, the more his headlights refracted in odd patterns, until the entire space in front of him looked like a pool of rippling glass. He passed through it without feeling a thing. No jolt, no noise, no sensation. Just one moment he was in the dead zone, and the next he was cruising past a "Welcome to Witsit" sign that hadn't been there a second earlier. The world came back all at once. Tire noise, wind, crickets. The CB hissed softly, picking up normal background chatter. Cody let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He pulled off the highway at the next gas station, parked, and killed the engine. The clock on the dash read 3:24 a.m. He stared at it, blinking, doing the math. That stretch of road should have taken him 10, maybe 15 minutes, but 47 minutes had passed. He checked his phone. Full signal. Time matched the dashboard. He opened the GPS. It showed his full route as if nothing had happened. No gap, no break. The highway between Pleasanton and Witsit was still there, but it was just normal now. Cody stayed in that parking lot for over an hour, chain smoking and listening to static on the CB. Every time he flipped it to another channel, he half expected that same voice to whisper again. It never did, but he knew what he'd heard. And he wasn't the only one. 2 days later, at a diner in Three Rivers, he overheard another trucker talking about the wall. The guy had hit it 2 weeks ago. Same spot, same symptoms, no signal, no sound, no time. Except when he turned around and went back the way he came, his tires shredded like they'd been slashed. And he swore he saw a pale figure standing in the road behind him as he changed the spare dot. No one wanted to believe these stories. They sounded like old wives' tales, the kind truckers tell to pass the time. But every so often, someone new would speak up, usually quietly, usually with the same haunted look in their eyes. Cody never drove that stretch again. He rerouted every time, even if it cost him hours. He never forgot the voice, and he never disobeyed what it said, because whatever was in that dead stretch of 281 Whatever was waiting in that silence, it didn't want him going back, and it sure as hell didn't want to be followed. They say West Texas has a way of swallowing time. The sun rises too slow and sets too fast, and the desert between towns breathes like something alive, dry and still, but always watching. Between mile markers 235 and 236 on a stretch of highway 90 that carves east out of Marfa like a half-forgotten scar, there's a place where the air changes. Not by much, just a few degrees cooler, even in July. Like the wind remembers something you don't. The sky darkens faster there, even when the sun's still high. And sometimes, just sometimes, a man appears on the shoulder. A man in a World War II uniform, boots polished and cap tilted just so. He raises his hand in a crisp salute as your car approaches, not waving, not begging, just acknowledging you. Like you're a commanding officer returning from the front. People talk about him in whispers in the bars along Highland Avenue. Not the tourists who come for the lights or the art, but the locals, the ones who've lived in Marfa long enough to know the desert doesn't always sleep. They say the soldier's been standing out there since at least the 70s. He doesn't age, doesn't change, just appears out of nowhere in the rearview mirror and vanishes the moment you look away. The first time I heard about him was from an old gas station attendant named Virgil. I'd pulled in to fill up late one night, running on fumes after a long haul from El Paso. Virgil was sweeping dust from the pumps, the kind of guy who looks like he's never seen a city in his life. He asked where I was headed, and when I told him I was going through to Sanderson, he leaned on the broom and gave me a strange look. "You going past 235 tonight?" He asked, real casual like. "Yeah, why?" "Don't stop, no matter what you see." I laughed it off, but his face didn't change. Just stared at me with eyes that looked too tired for someone who never left the county line. Left the station around 11:30, the radio crackling with a dying AM station playing some old Roy Orbison track. The road ahead stretched into pitch black. Nothingness, flanked by sagging fences and clusters of mesquite. I saw mile marker 233 flash by, then 234. The air felt wrong, thicker somehow. The wind had stopped moving entirely, and even the engine seemed quieter, like the desert was muffling the sound. Then I saw him. He was just standing there at the edge of the road, right where marker 235 began. Straight-backed, maybe 6 feet. Tall, clean-shaven, with that old green uniform and a duffel slung over his shoulder. His boots were covered in red dust, and his eyes. They caught the headlights just wrong, like glass. He saluted. I didn't stop. My fingers tightened on the wheel and I kept going, watching him in the mirror until he faded into the night. But something was off. When I looked back to the road, I was passing marker 236. It shouldn't have happened that fast. I glanced at the clock. 11:46 p.m. I checked it again a few seconds later. 12:09 a.m. I'd lost 23 minutes. I didn't sleep when I got to the motel in Sanderson. My head ached and my eyes burned. I kept seeing flashes when I blinked: barbed wire fences, the curved edge of a steel helmet, dunes shaped like graves. I told myself it was exhaustion, the desert playing tricks on my mind. But that night, I dreamed I was in a trench, sand instead of mud, the air dry and full of static. A line of soldiers crouched beside me, silent, faceless. In the distance, artillery shells bloomed like fireworks, lighting up the night in eerie bursts. I could smell gunpowder and rot and hear the crunch of footsteps above, just out of sight. Someone behind me whispered, "Edward Nathaniel, you're late." I haven't used my middle name since I was a kid. No one calls me that. I woke up gasping, with a mouth full of dust and my boots still on. I pulled them off and flipped them over, and red sand spilled out. A fine, gritty powder that didn't belong anywhere near a motel room. I never told anyone about that, not even my wife. but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Over the next year, I made excuses to drive through Marfa again. Each time I watched for him. Sometimes he was there, sometimes not. When he was, he always saluted. Once, I slowed down just enough to get a better look. His name tag read H. Creed. I tried to research him, no record of a soldier by that name. Stationed anywhere near West Texas. No missing persons reports, no obituaries, nothing. But the stories kept piling up. A woman named Carla P., who worked at the Marfa Book Company, disappeared for 7 hours after stopping to help what she thought was a stranded reenactor. Her car was parked on the shoulder near marker 235, key still in the ignition. When she turned up again, barefoot and dazed, she had no memory of what happened, just recurring dreams of marching through sand, holding a rusted rifle, and hearing someone whisper her middle name, Annabeth, over and over. Another man, a tourist from Michigan, said he saw the soldier appear in his back seat while driving alone at night. Just there, suddenly staring straight ahead like he was waiting to deploy. The man passed out at the wheel and wrecked his SUV in a ditch. When the sheriff found him, he was muttering coordinates and sobbing, asking where the rest of his unit had gone. And then there's the trucker. No one knows his name anymore, just Old Red, a guy who used to run loads from Presidio up to I-10. They say he stopped for the soldier in the late 80s. Picked him up without a second thought. Said he looked too clean to be real, but figured it was some kind of joke. He was found 2 days later in a dry creek bed 5 miles off course. Still alive, dehydrated, ranting about a battlefield under the sand. Ghosts digging foxholes, whispers saying, "Don't forget us." When he finally talked to the press, all he would say was, "They're stuck there." That whole mile is a loop, like time forgot to keep moving. You stop there, and you stop for good. After that, no one heard from him again. There's a theory that gets passed around by the more academic types, folks who come to study the Marfalites and end up poking their noses where they don't belong. They say during World War II there was a training base near that stretch of Highway 90. A platoon went missing during a desert exercise, vanished without a trace. No bodies, no gear, just gone. The official story is that they got lost in a sandstorm and succumbed to the heat. But some of the declassified reports mention hallucinations, odd magnetic fields, even a few mentions of perceptual displacement. In other words, the desert broke reality. It sounds like nonsense until you drive past 235 with the windows down. That's when you hear them. Soft voices carried on the wind, names, middle names, drifting like smoke. You feel eyes on you. Not one pair, dozens, hundreds, waiting. Last year, I made the mistake of stopping. I told myself I just wanted to leave flowers. I don't know why. Maybe guilt. Maybe curiosity. I pulled over just before dusk, right at 235. The soldier wasn't there, just the marker, leaning slightly, worn down by sun and wind. I got out, set the flowers down, and looked around. There was nothing. Then I blinked, and I was in a trench again. Same sand. Same sky. Only this time it wasn't a dream. I could smell sweat, hear distant screaming. Shadows moved above the ridge, fast and flickering. One of them crouched next to me and passed a canteen. He had no face, just a smooth stretch of skin where eyes and a mouth should have been. I tried to run. The sky cracked open with lightning, and for a moment I saw the highway above me, like I was buried beneath it, reaching up through a layer of time and dust. When I woke up, it was morning. My car was right where I left it. The flowers were gone. My boots were full of sand again. I don't stop anymore. I don't even slow down. I turn up the radio, keep my eyes straight ahead, and pray I never see that soldier again. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear him whisper my name. All three of them. Like he knows me. Like he's waiting. And if you ever find yourself on that stretch of Highway 90, remember this mile marker 235 isn't just a piece of metal in the dirt. It's a door. And some doors don't close behind you. The road was as empty as a grave at midnight. FM 170 ran like a cracked ribbon through the Badlands of West Texas, curling along the Rio Grande between Lajitas and Presidio. It was a place of isolation and heat shimmer where the canyons cut deep, and the sky opened wide and endless. During the day, it felt like the edge of the world's sun-scorched rock, brittle brush, and the occasional vulture circling high. At night, it felt like the world had ended and no one had noticed. The man's name was Joel Carter, 42 years old, born in San Angelo, and recently laid off from his job at an oilfield equipment company. He was on his way to visit his sister in Marfa, looking for a change of scenery, maybe a new start. The rental car's air conditioner wheezed in protest as he drove west into the dusk. His phone had lost signal just past Lajitas, and the gas gauge was dipping lower than he liked. But the desert had a way of making you feel small and slow, like there was no urgency to anything. The first scream came just after twilight. When the horizon still held the faintest orange glow. It didn't sound like an animal. That was the first thing that struck him. It was too high, too long, like a woman being torn apart slowly. It echoed across the rocks with unnatural clarity. Joel jerked the wheel slightly, startled, and slowed the car to a crawl. He scanned the ridgelines on both sides of the road, his headlights cutting across boulders and scrub. Then silence. Just the wind. Joel wasn't the kind of man to believe in ghost stories. He believed in bad luck, drunk drivers, and dehydration. He figured maybe it was a cougar, or even a fox that could make eerie sounds when they wanted to. But something about that scream set his teeth on edge. A minute later, there was another one. Closer this time. Directly off to the right, somewhere in the canyon shadows. Against his better judgment, Joel pulled over. He stepped out into the desert night, leaving the car running. The air was cooler now, but dry as bone, and filled with that dusty scent. OF mesquite and limestone. He called out, "Hello? Anyone out there?" More out of habit than expectation. The sound of his own voice felt thin and foolish. For a few seconds, there was only the hum of the engine and the chirp of crickets. Then he saw a dot at the edge of his headlights. No more than 30 feet away stood a coyote. Or at least, he thought, it was. It had the right snout, the pointed ears, the rough gray fur. But it was standing on two legs, upright, still as a statue. Its eyes caught the light in a strange way, not like the reflective glow of an animal, but almost internal, as if something behind its gaze was looking back. Joel froze. His body registered what his brain didn't want to accept. The thing took a step forward. Its hind legs bent wrong, too long, like a man wearing a coyote's skin. Its head tilted, and it opened its mouth. What came out wasn't a bark or a growl. It was the same scream. That long, human wail that had shattered the desert silence earlier. Joel jumped back into the car and floored the accelerator. The tires spit gravel as he shot back onto the road, heart hammering against his ribs. But the moment he glanced in the rearview mirror, he saw it running after him on two legs, smooth and effortless, matching his speed. He pushed the car faster, 80, 90. The speedometer trembled. It stayed with him. For 2 full miles, it ran just outside his driver's side window, not even breathing hard. Its face never changed. It didn't look angry. It looked curious, like a child dissecting a bug. Then, without warning, it veered off the road into a gulch and vanished into a cloud of dust. Joel didn't stop until he hit Presidio. He pulled into the first gas station he could find, parked crooked, and stumbled out to puke behind the dumpster. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He tried to tell the clerk what he'd seen, but the guy just nodded and said, "Weird shit happens." Out on FM 170, no shock, no questions. Just that quiet West Texas resignation, like Joel had joined some unspoken fraternity of desert madness. The next morning, Joel told himself it had been a hallucination. Maybe heat stroke, maybe he dozed off at the wheel. He kept the radio off for the rest of the drive to Marfa, but that scream haunted him. He'd never heard a sound like it, something between a death rattle and a sob. A week later, he decided to go back. He told himself it was to prove it hadn't happened. He needed to see the road again in the daylight to shake the fear loose from his bones. He rented a different car and drove out around noon. The sun was high, bleaching the desert into shades of bone and ash. He reached the same stretch mile, marker 87, and pulled over. Nothing. No footprints. No broken brush. No sign of anything. But then he saw something nailed to a fence post off the road. It was a bone. Long, narrow, human-shaped, weathered to yellow. Someone had tied strands of black hair around it in loops and knots, and what looked like old coyote fur was draped across the top. Like a twisted fetish. Joel backed away and got in the car. He didn't look back. Over the following months, he started digging, quietly. Online forums, local message boards, weird old books at the Marfa Library. He found whispers of things: the Yi-Nald Lushi, the Skinwalker, a witch in Navajo lore that could wear the skin of animals. They were said to run faster than any man, mimic voices, scream like people in pain. One account said they lived in canyons away from people and only came out when the veil was thin. Another story told of a man who'd killed a coyote on that very stretch of FM 170, skinned it and sold the pelt. Days later, his wife vanished. Then his kids. The police found the house soaked in blood, but no bodies. Just claw marks on the walls and long strands of black hair. Joel stopped sleeping through the night. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard that scream. One night, he woke up and found coyote tracks in the dust outside his window. Another night, he saw the reflection of eyes in the glass too tall for a dog. Just watching. He moved back to San Angelo, but the feeling followed him. The sense that something was just out of view, just behind the door or under the floorboards. And every now and then, on windless nights, he heard that same scream, even though he was hundreds of miles away from the desert. The sound always came from outside. Always started faint, then grew louder, like whatever it was had found him again. He stopped leaving the house after dark, stopped answering the phone. Eventually, he stopped being seen altogether. The landlord found the place abandoned a year later. The front door was locked from the inside, the windows covered in newspaper. On the wall, someone had drawn a crude coyote face in black charcoal. Underneath it, scrawled in jagged handwriting, "It wears your voice last." There were claw marks in the floorboards. No one's seen Joel Carter since. It was near the end of July, when the sun in West Texas didn't so much rise as it boiled up over the horizon, and even the breeze felt like it carried tiny blades. Cal Duncan had been working road crews out near Fort Stockton for going on 15 years, and he knew the terrain like the back of his sun-scorched hands. It was a lonely stretch of work, especially that patch of I-10 a few miles west of town. Near an abandoned overpass no one seemed to remember being useful. Locals said it was a failed project from the late 60s, a half-assed connector to nowhere. That got shut down after a fatal pileup during construction. There were always stories, the kind old men swapped at bars after 3 Lone Stars too many. Cal had heard them all. He never paid attention. That changed one Thursday morning just after 6. when the air still smelled of diesel and creosote and the sun cast everything in a faint, copper-tinted hue. Cal had driven out early to check the ground stability near mile marker 272, just a little ways past the broken fencing and dry mesquite brush that shielded the base of the old overpass. The thing looked like it had just sat there for decades, cracked and rust-stained, a useless hunk of reinforced concrete, held up by thick columns scarred with graffiti and heat damage. There wasn't any traffic on it, hadn't been in years. The dirt road leading up to it was blocked by rusted barricades, and the county hadn't bothered to take it down because, frankly, there was no reason to go up there. But that morning, as Cal got out of his truck and walked toward the survey marker hammered into the hard-packed dirt, something made him stop. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't movement. It was a feeling thick and immediate, like walking into a room where someone had just been murdered and the air hadn't yet settled. Cal looked up, instinct more than curiosity, and that's when he saw them. A pair of feet, bare, pale, almost bluish, dangling underneath the middle section of the overpass. They weren't swinging wildly, just gently swaying back and forth, maybe a few feet from the column nearest the old drainage ditch. Cal blinked, thought it was a trick of the light. But they were still there, toes slightly curled, skin oddly clean for the dust and grime that coated everything out here. He didn't run. Cal wasn't the type to panic. He just backed slowly toward the truck, never taking his eyes off the feet, and grabbed his radio. Static hissed. "Luis, you copy?" he said. There was a crackle, then a muffled reply. "Yeah, I'm up on 271. What's up?" "Something ain't right," Cal said. I think someone hanged themselves off the old overpass." "I can." "See the feet. Get over here." Luis didn't question him. 15 minutes later, 3 more trucks pulled up, bringing Luis, Steve, and Manny. Cal hadn't moved the whole time. He just stood by his truck and watched the feet sway, though by then they'd slowed down, almost still. But when the others got there and looked up, they saw nothing. No feet. No body. Just the bare, cracked underside of the overpass, casting a long shadow across the dried creek bed. For a second, Cal thought he was losing it. Maybe heat stroke. Maybe lack of sleep. But then Manny pointed at something. "There," he said, walking forward. "See that?" A length of rope-thick frayed, stained was still tied around the metal support beam, the end dangling about 10 feet off the ground. It was moving slightly, too much for the faint breeze, and then they smelled it. Perfume. Strong, cloying, sweet. Not like body spray or anything modern. This was old-fashioned, musky, like the kind a grandmother might wear to church. It shouldn't have been there, not under the overpass, not in the heat, and certainly not with the wind coming from the south. Cal felt the hairs on his arms lift. He hadn't imagined it. Something had been there. They called the sheriff, but by the time he showed up nearly 40 minutes later, the rope was gone. Not cut, not lying in the brush. Just gone, and the perfume had faded. The sheriff, an old barrel-bellied man named Cross, raised one skeptical brow. "You boys drinking this early?" Cal didn't laugh. Neither did Louise or the others. "I know what I saw. Cross made a report, but nothing ever came of it. No missing persons. No body, no crime scene. Just a weird story that the younger guys on the crew started whispering about during lunch breaks, usually with nervous glances toward the overpass. That should have been the end of it. Just another strange event in a place too wide and empty for comfort." But at WSN T.2 weeks later, Manny stopped showing up to work. No call, no texts. His wife said he'd left early that morning, said he needed to check something near mile marker 272. His truck was found a day later, parked at the base of the overpass. Key still in the ignition, phone on the seat, Doors locked. No sign of him. Kel was the one who walked up the incline to the top of the overpass, hard hammering so hard he thought it might shake something loose. The pavement up there was cracked, weeds pushing through like green veins. There were no signs of struggle, no blood. But right in the middle, etched deep into the concrete, was a handprint. It looked burned in, scorched black, as if someone had pressed a branding iron into the ground. It was small, delicate, feminine. After that, the site got shut down. Too many people afraid to go near it. Rumors spread fast in towns like Fort Stockton. They said a woman had killed herself there decades ago, back when the overpass was still new. Some said she was pregnant, dumped by a married man who worked construction. Others claimed she was pushed. Either way, she'd hung herself from the beam, and no one found her for 3 days. When they did, the story went, her body had turned to stone, face twisted in agony, perfume still clinging to the air. Cal tried to forget. He really did. But some nights, when the wind was just right, he'd wake up in a cold sweat, the scent of perfume thick in his bedroom, and outside, somewhere far off, the faint sound of rope creaking in the breeze. They never found Manny. Years passed. New roads were paved. The old overpass was finally demolished, though it took longer than expected. Machinery broke down. Workers reported seeing things. One man quit on the spot, claimed a woman stood at the edge of the overpass every morning. Before sunrise, staring down at him, her head tilted too far to the side. Cal doesn't work roads anymore. He lives alone in a small house outside of town. Keeps his windows covered. Never drives west past mile marker 272. He still has dreams. And in every single one, it's the same. A pair of pale feet dangling from the sky. The scent of old perfume. And a soft, breathless sound of something whispering his name from just above the concrete. Most folks around Canyon, Texas will talk your ear off about the beauty of Palo Duro Canyon, how the walls blaze orange and red at sunset, how the wind whispers through the stone like a ghost's lullaby. But if you get a local drunk enough, or if you ask one of the old-timers down at that dusty bait shop off Route 217, you might hear them mention something else. Not loud and not with pride. They'll shift in their chairs and look out the window like they're remembering something they wish they could forget, that it's not on any tourist brochure. But there's something wrong with that stretch of highway, just before the main entrance to the canyon. And it's not just local folklore. I saw it myself in '09, and I ain't been right since. I was driving a rusted-out '92 Ford Ranger down from Amarillo late one evening. I just wrapped up a job fixing a busted water heater for a ranch house off the interstate. The sun was bleeding out behind the cliffs, casting shadows that looked like they were breathing. I was tired, hungry, and more than a little lost. GPS didn't work worth a damn out there, and my radio had turned to static once I passed the last cell tower near Umbarger. Saw him just past the turnoff sign for the canyon entrance. He was standing on the gravel shoulder, facing the road. Cowboy hat low over his brow, jeans dusty, boots planted square. He looked like a ranch hand from 50 years back, like he just stepped out of a Marlboro ad. At first, I didn't think much of it. People hitch rides around here all the time, farmhands, drifters, even tourists that get in over their heads. But something about the way he stood there, arms hanging loose at his sides like he wasn't really waiting, more like he was daring you to stop. It gave me pause. Still, I pulled over. I don't know why. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was the way he looked so damn still, like time forgot him. He didn't wave or even acknowledge the truck rolling up. Just turned his head slow, real slow, and looked straight into my windshield. That's when I saw the eyes. Bright red. Not glowing like a flashlight beam, but deep like embers. like something alive was behind them, watching me from under a skin mask made to look human. I should have driven. Every hair on my arm was standing up, but my body didn't move. I was stuck in my seat like I'd hit black ice, staring back at those burning eyes. Then he climbed in. He didn't open the door, just appeared in the passenger seat. I don't remember hearing the handle click. Don't remember seeing him move. One moment the seat was empty, the next he was sitting there, dust from the road still clinging to his boots. The inside of the cab felt like it dropped 20 degrees. I could see my breath. He never said a word. I tried. I asked where he was headed. I asked if he was all right. My voice sounded small in the cab, like it belonged to someone else. He didn't look at me, just stared straight ahead, hands folded in his lap like he was waiting for something. After a minute, I gave up and kept driving. The canyon loomed ahead, dark and yawning. I hadn't realized how late it had gotten. The sun was gone now, and the sky had turned that deep ink-black color where even the stars look afraid to shine. I took a wrong turn somewhere near the visitor center and ended up on one of those narrow dirt service roads that snake around the cliffs. The kind rangers use, not meant for casual drivers. That's when the radio sputtered to life. No music, just garbled voices, static and muttering, like a dozen people whispering over each other. I turned the knob, but it didn't stop. I even shut the radio off, pulled the damn fuse, and the noise kept coming. It was coming from him. He opened his mouth, but his lips didn't move. The sounds were pouring out of him, women crying, men screaming, a baby gasping like it was drowning. All of it at once. The air in the truck turned thick, like trying to breathe underwater. My hands were slick with sweat on the wheel, but I couldn't stop driving. I don't remember how long I was out there. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. The road stretched and twisted in impossible ways. At one point, I swear I saw my own tail lights ahead of me, as if I was chasing myself. The canyon walls seemed to close in, red rock glowing faintly in the dark like veins under skin. Shadows moved without sources. Shapes ran beside the truck, long and thin and too fast to be human. Then, just as suddenly as it started, I was back. On the main highway, clean road, normal air. The passenger seat was empty. I pulled over and vomited into the dust. I made it home somehow. Can't remember the drive. My wife said I didn't speak for 2 days, just sat in the den staring at the wall. But that was only the start. It began with the boots. Heavy footsteps in the hallway at night. Thump, thump, like someone walking slow, measured. I'd get up, check every room. Nothing. The first few nights I figured I was just shaken up. Stress. Maybe, but it kept happening. Every damn night, exactly at 2:14 a.m. The sound of boots pacing from the front door to the back of the house, then stopping outside the bedroom, just standing there, not knocking, not moving, just waiting. My wife started hearing it too. She asked me who it was. I told her not to worry. She left me 2 weeks later. It didn't stop. Neighbors said they saw someone standing outside my house some nights. A tall man in a cowboy hat, never moved. One guy, Travis, works at the gas station off 87, swears he saw him watching from the edge of his own backyard at 3 in the morning. I live 6 miles from Travis. I started drinking again, sleeping with the lights on, but no matter what I did, the boots came. Then the whispering started. It wasn't in my head. I recorded it once, set up a cheap tape recorder in the hallway. Played it back the next morning and nearly pissed myself. You could hear it plain as day. A voice, slow and gravelly, saying, "You saw me. You let me in." That night I burned the tape. I tried leaving town. Drove all the way to Lubbock, stayed with an old friend. First night there, boots. Hallway, 2:14 a.m. He heard them too. I don't know what that thing is. Spirit, demon, curse, don't care. All I know is I should have kept driving. Now I sit here, night after night, shotgun in my lap, waiting for those boots, because he's getting closer. I know it. The pacing has changed. No longer just the hallway. Now I hear the boards creak on the porch. I hear the knob jiggle. Last night, he knocked out once, just once. I didn't answer. Tonight, I might not have a choice. In Val Verde County, Texas, a few miles outside the dying town of Comstock, there's a stretch of gravel road known only as County Road 666. It doesn't show up on GPS anymore, though older maps have it penciled in as a ranch access lane, forgotten and unmaintained, tucked between sun-blasted hills and dry mesquite scrub. Folks who've lived in the area long enough know better than to drive it after dark. They whisper about lights in the sky, about something that watches from the thickets, and about the cattle. Always the cattle. It started quietly, as these things do. A few head of black Angus went missing from the Bradshaw Ranch in early September, right after the first cold front passed through. At first, the old man blamed coyotes, maybe rustlers, until he found one of the missing steers 3 days later, lying flat in a clearing about 40 yards from the fence line. The animal had been sliced open from sternum to groin. No blood, not a drop. Not in the body, not on the soil. Its eyes were gone. Not pecked or torn, but cleanly scooped, the sockets smooth and dry like ceramic bowls. The tongue was missing too, removed so precisely it looked like it had never been there. The sheriff, a man named Cord Briggs, came out in his dust-covered SUV and took photos, asked questions, scratched his head. Satanic cult, he offered with no real conviction. Maybe college kids. Devil worship meth, who knows? But even he didn't stick around long after sundown, and he told the Bradshaws to keep their cattle penned tight at night. Over the next 3 weeks, 5 more mutilations were reported by 3 different ranchers. All the same, precise incisions. No signs of struggle, no blood, no tracks, no scavenger damage. Even the buzzards wouldn't touch them. One carcass lay for 10 days in a pasture before it finally vanished. No bones, no hide, just gone. By then, folks had stopped talking to the sheriff. Instead, they locked their gates at night and whispered prayers over their livestock. The local paper, the Val Verde Sentinel, ran a small story on it. Page 5. A few ranchers from out east caught wind and drove in to look, but they didn't stay long. One man, a veterinarian from Uvalde, tried to examine one of the more recent carcasses. His name was Clay Barker, a sober, factual man with thick glasses and a degree from Texas A&M. He'd seen plenty of oddities in his time, but nothing like what he found on County Road 666. The animal he examined had its internal organs removed without so much as a torn muscle, not just removed, extracted. Heart, liver, lungs all missing. The tissue was cauterized around the cuts, as if by heat, but there were no burn marks. Clay went home that evening and reportedly burned all his notes. 2 days later, he stopped returning calls. Then came the dare. A 17-year-old kid from town, Jesse Callahan, was the type who didn't spook easy. He was the son of a game warden, used to tracking animals and sleeping under open skies. When rumors started swirling around school about the mutilations and strange lights in the trees, he laughed it off. Probably some government drone crap, he told his friends. I'll camp out there overnight, live stream the whole thing. Y'all can see it's just a bunch of paranoid ranchers. So he did. He left on a Friday evening, drove his old Tacoma down the bumpy stretch of County Road 666, set up camp near a dry wash where most of the cattle had been found. His friends watched the live stream for about 2 hours. The usual teenage. Nonsense beer, jokes, mocking the ghost cows. Around 11, the stream cut out. Just static. They found him the next morning wandering barefoot down FM 1024, 30 miles away, sunburned and shaking. His eyes were glassy, feet torn to ribbons from the rocks and caliche. When the deputy asked what happened, he just kept whispering. They flowed above the trees, over and over, like a prayer or a confession. He didn't speak again after that. They put him in the state hospital in Kerrville, where he sits to this day, staring out the window at nothing. No one camps out there anymore. In fact, few people drive that road at all. The gravel's nearly gone, washed out by years of neglect. And flooding. Mesquite branches claw at the sides of passing trucks, and there's a constant, unnatural stillness in the air, as if the land itself is holding its breath. But the mutilations continue. Last spring, a rancher named Lenora Dietz found a calf in her south pasture, half its body missing. Not torn or eaten, missing. The cut ended in a clean diagonal, like something massive had sheared the animal in half and taken the rest. No blood, no drag marks, just silence. The dog that found it with her refused to go near it and ran off into the brush. She hasn't seen it since. After that, people started calling in sightings. Strange lights hovering above the tree line. Pale white, silent, drifting slowly in odd geometric patterns. Sometimes they come in threes, sometimes in a perfect line. They never make a sound and they never come close. But if you watch long enough, you get the feeling they're watching you back. One night, a trucker passing through claimed to see something in the road. Said it looked like a person standing perfectly still in the middle of the gravel path, arms at its sides. He slowed down, shined his high beams. That's when he saw the eyes, or rather, the empty black where the eyes should be. Two hollow pits that seemed to drink in the light. He gunned the engine and swerved around it, not looking back. The next morning, his rig was found abandoned 20 miles north, engine running, door wide open. No sign of him. There are rumors now. Theories. UFO nuts think it's some kind of alien experiment zone. Maybe an old Air Force black site. Bible thumpers say it's a cursed place, tainted by something older than man. Something buried deep beneath the rocks and cactus, hungry and patient. Some say the land remembers a time before fences and boundaries. Before roads, before people, and it wants that silence back. But the most disturbing story came from an old woman named Ruby Hollis, who lives alone in a crumbling house just a few 100 yards off the road. She doesn't drive, doesn't talk much. Folks thought she'd gone senile long ago. But one night, a deputy found her on her front porch, clutching a rifle, eyes wide, muttering. He sat with her for an hour before she calmed down enough to speak. "They come at night," she said. "They don't walk. They don't fly. They just appear. White things, long arms, no faces. You'll hear the cattle screaming. Not like they're dying, like they're begging. Then it gets quiet. Then they're gone. The cattle too." She paused then, shivering despite the heat. I saw one look through my window. It didn't have eyes, but I knew it could see me. It knew me, like it had always known me. The deputy asked why she didn't leave, why she stayed out there alone. She just looked at him and whispered, "You can't run from something that's inside the sky." Nobody knows what she meant by that. She died a few months later in her sleep. Natural causes, they said. But her window was shattered from the inside, and her body was found facing the open desert, mouth frozen in a scream. Today, County Road 666 is barely more than a memory. The brush has nearly swallowed it, and the ranches nearby have either sold or fallen into disrepair. Even the buzzards avoid the area now. But every so often, someone new comes through, a hunter, a camper, A thrill seeker, and if they stray too far off the main road, they sometimes don't come back. Or worse, they do. Wandering barefoot, eyes vacant, whispering about lights that float above the trees. It started with the fog, low and dense across the fields just south of Bastrop. That early December morning had the kind of cold that clung to your jeans, bit through your flannel, and soaked into your skin like smoke. Travis and Mia had been driving west on Highway 71 when they turned off on a smaller road, no name on the rusted sign. Just a crook number. FM 2127. Travis had a knack for old roads, loved hunting down forgotten places. Mia humored him because she loved him, though. Her patience thinned with each rut in the dirt and every hollowed-out barn they passed. But this one was different. The road dipped, narrowed, and wound through what looked like an old pecan orchard choked with brambles. Trees twisted together overhead like arms, blocking the sun. Then the fog rolled in, crawling over the ground, and the trees broke open into a wide, dead field. A collapsed farmhouse hunched at the far end like a scab on the land, its windows broken, roof caved in. Siding burned or blackened with mold. Mia got out of the truck first. Her boots sank into the soft mud, and she laughed when she almost lost. 1. Travis, always with his Nikon slung over one shoulder and his iPhone in the other hand, trailed after her. The air smelled of damp hay and something sweeter underneath, like rotting fruit. "We should get a shot here," he said. "That? Fog makes it look like another world." They stood in the center of the field, fog around their knees. Mia wrapped her arm through his and smiled while he snapped a few pictures. Then they took selfies, like they always did, her pressed up against his side, both of them framed by the ruins and mist. They didn't see her then. It wasn't until later that night, back at their apartment in Austin, when Mia flipped through the pictures on her phone. She stopped scrolling mid-laugh, her face slowly paling. In one of the selfies, third or fourth, the one where Travis had leaned down to kiss the side of her head, there was someone else in the frame. A girl, maybe 13 or 14, stood about 20 feet behind them. She was barefoot in the mud. Her dress was the kind of thing you'd see in black and white photos. High collar, tight waist, hemmed down to her ankles. Her hair hung in two braids, thick and dark. She was thin, almost skeletal, and her skin was the color of wax. But it was her eyes that made Mia gasp. They were wide open, huge and empty, nothing but milky white, like boiled eggs shoved into her skull. "Travis," she whispered. "Who is that?" He leaned in, expecting maybe a deer or something in the background. But the second he saw the girl, he stepped back like he'd touched a stove. No way she was there. "I'd have seen her. Are you messing with me?" Mia asked, voice rising. "No, I swear, Mia, I didn't edit that." "I didn't add anything." They tried to explain it away. Some weird reflection, a glitch. But the girl was there, clear as day. Her feet left no prints. She was standing in thick mud, yet nothing was disturbed around her. They went to sleep without speaking. Both dreamed of the field, of fog pressing in, cold breath on their necks, of footsteps behind them that never got closer. The next morning, Travis checked the photos again. The girl wasn't in the others, just that one. He almost convinced himself it was some trick of the light, some creepy but harmless fluke. Then came the photos from later that week. They went out to eat with friends. Someone snapped a picture at the restaurant, nothing unusual. But when Mia got tagged in the post, her stomach dropped. There, over her shoulder in the booth behind them, was the same pale girl. Eyes white, hands folded in her lap, half shrouded in shadow. The photo was taken 50 miles away from Bastrop. They started looking closer. Every photo they took or that was taken of them after the farm had the girl. Sometimes she was barely there. A smear of white in a reflection, a pair of eyes behind a tree. Other times she was more obvious. In the window behind Mia while she brushed her teeth. In the mirror above Travis's dresser. In the passenger seat of their truck, looking straight into the camera during a selfie Travis didn't remember taking. They stopped taking photos. They asked friends not to tag them, but it didn't matter. One night, a coworker texted Travis, "Dude, who's that creepy kid in your wedding picture?" They'd been married for 2 years. That picture had been framed on the wall since the day they moved in. But now, somehow, the girl stood behind them, between the pastor and Travis's brother. No one had touched the photo. No one had reprinted it. But she was there, her blank eyes aimed squarely at the lens. Travis started sleeping on the couch. Mia stayed in bed, clutching a crucifix she hadn't touched since college. At night, she'd hear soft footsteps outside the bedroom. Sometimes the doorknob would rattle. Once the door opened a full inch before she screamed. They tried deleting every photo, wiping their phones, switching out SIM cards. Nothing worked. The girl kept showing up. Mia took a photo of her lunch one afternoon to send to her sister. No people in it, just a sandwich on a plate. But there, reflected in the butter knife, was a tiny version of that pale face. Travis stopped going to work. He spent his days reading message boards, looking for anything that sounded similar. He found mentions of a girl named Emily, a few scattered accounts over the years, all from Central Texas, people who saw her in windows and photographs in rearview mirrors, always near farms, always fogged up. The last known sighting before theirs was in 1981. A woman named Claire Jensen claimed the girl appeared in her family portraits for months. She'd moved, changed phones, even switched film brands. Nothing worked. Eventually, Claire disappeared. Her car was found abandoned near a lake outside Bastrop, the driver's door open, keys in the ignition. No sign of her body. Mia read that article over and over. She circled the lake on a map. The road leading to it, FM 2127, same road, same field. She begged Travis to go back with her. Said maybe they could break whatever this was. Return. To where it started, they left before sunrise. Neither of them spoke during the drive. The fog was there before they even reached the field, thicker this time. When they stepped out of the truck, the air felt like wet cotton shoved into their lungs. They walked to the center of the field. The collapsed house was worse now, sagging deeper into the earth. It smelled like wet wood and mold. Mia took out her phone. She raised it, hesitated, then snapped one picture. Nothing but fog and ruin. She took another. This time, the girl stood 10 feet away, closer than she'd ever been. Her arms hung limp at her sides. Her mouth was open slightly, as if whispering something neither of them could hear. The air around them dropped in temperature. Travis's breath fogged. "She's coming closer," Mia said. Travis took out his Nikon and raised it. "Don't," Mia whispered, but he clicked the shutter anyway. The girl's face was right there, inches from the lens. The photo would later show Travis falling backward, his mouth open in a scream. Behind him, the girl loomed, her hands stretching toward him. That was the last image ever taken. Travis went missing the next night. Mia said he left to buy cigarettes and never came back. His truck was found abandoned on the shoulder of FM 2127 near the edge of that same field. The driver's side door open. Keys still in the ignition. Mia moved to Dallas, changed her number, deleted every account she had, but every few weeks a new envelope would arrive. No return address. Inside, a printed photo. Sometimes it was a picture of her walking down the street. Once it was from inside her apartment. She could see herself sleeping in bed. In the corner of every photo was the girl. a little closer each time. They say you don't drive Route 277 after midnight unless you've got somewhere you absolutely have to be. Truckers used to call it the dark vein running through South Texas, a 2-lane stretch of cracked asphalt that cuts through nothing but mesquite thickets, dried up ranch land, and towns so forgotten the streetlights don't come on anymore. It runs from Del Rio to Carrizo Springs and winds past Eagle Pass like a snake that gave up shedding its skin. And if you ask any local, they'll tell you not to look in your rearview mirror when you're 20 minutes outside of Eagle Pass, especially when the road starts to dip and the moonlight goes flat. That's when the black car starts showing up. I hadn't believed any of that until the summer of 2017, when I drove that route myself. My name's Mason Gutierrez. I was 32 at the time, freshly divorced, half drunk on loneliness, and trying to hold on to my job running maintenance checks on cell towers spread across the Southwest. I just finished an all-day job near Uvalde and was headed back toward Laredo by way of 277. I could have taken the I-35 like a sane person, but my GPS said 277 was faster, and I figured I could shave an hour off if I gunned it through the night. I'd done similar drives before. Hell, I'd grown up in Texas. I knew these roads. They didn't scare me, but that night was different from the moment I turned onto 277 at about 10:40 p.m. The air felt stale, heavy, somehow. The kind of night where even the breeze smells wrong. There was a brush fire smell riding the wind, sharp and metallic like copper left on a burner. The crickets were going wild, buzzing louder than I'd ever heard before. The moon was full, but the light was flat and gray, drained of warmth. And that road miles and miles of black, no other headlights in sight, just my little silver Tacoma. Slicing through the dark felt too empty, like I'd slipped out of the real-world dot about 20 minutes past Eagle Pass. I passed an old gas station closed, boarded up, the kind with a rusted-out Texaco sign spinning lazily in the wind. That's where the road starts dipping, just like the stories say. I noticed it because my ears popped, like I was descending. The GPS said there was a slight elevation change, but it felt steeper than that, like the road was pulling me down instead of guiding me forward. Then I saw the lights dot at first. I thought they were just far-off reflectors catching my headlights. But then they flared 2 piercing white beams that blinked once, then again like eyes opening in the dark. A second later, a jet-black car was behind me. I didn't hear it approach. 1 minute it wasn't there. The next, it was riding my bumper like it had been tailing me for miles. I couldn't make out the make or model. It looked old 1950s maybe, but restored, glossy like it had just rolled off the showroom floor. Chrome grille, long hood, windows so dark they looked painted. But the strangest thing was the sound or lack of it. My truck was rattling, the engine humming loud, tires grinding on the broken road, but that black car made no sound at all. None. It was gliding. Like it was floating. Its headlights flashed again, high beamed straight into my mirrors. I squinted. Cursed, flicked my hazards. The car blared its horn. Not a modern beep, but this deep, echoing blast that shook my chest like a train was bearing down on me. I sped up to 70, then 80. Still, it stayed inches behind me, lights flashing. Horn screaming. I veered into the shoulder, dust kicking up all around me, and skidded to a stop. The black car pulled over too, right behind me. Then its lights clicked off. I sat there gripping the wheel, trying to see through the mirrors, heart pounding. The crickets had stopped. Everything was still. I opened the door, stepping into the T. Hot night air. I looked back, nothing, no car. No headlights. Just empty road behind me, it was gone. I stood there for a good minute, breathing hard, listening. Still no sound. No wind, no bugs, just a hollow quiet that pressed on my eardrums like I was underwater. Then I noticed the smell. Thick, acrid, like burnt motor oil and pennies left out in the sun. It coated the back of my throat. I climbed back into my truck, tried the ignition. Nothing. Dead. Battery wasn't just weak, it was drained. I checked my phone. No signal, not a bar. The screen flickered like it was on its last legs, then went black. I was stuck, and that's when I heard it. Footsteps, soft, slow, crunching the gravel behind my truck. I turned, but again nothing. Just open road. I locked the doors. Then, from somewhere close, a man's voice whispered, "It ain't your road." No more. It came from inside the cab. I spun around, passenger seat empty. Back seat empty. But the air in the truck had turned ice cold. The smell stronger now, choking me. I slammed my hand on the horn, but it didn't work. Everything electric was dead. I fumbled for my flashlight in the glove box, then stopped. On the inside of the windshield, right above the dashboard, words had appeared. Written in smeared black grease, backwards so I could read them from the inside. Keep driving. I didn't think. I got out of the truck, ran down the road in the direction I'd come. No signal, no passing cars. Just that awful silence chasing me like a shadow. I don't know how long I ran, maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. Time got weird. I started seeing things at the edge of the road, shape standing behind barbed wire fences, watching. Long arms, too many joints. Heads that didn't move, even as I passed. Finally, headlights came over a hill behind me. An old Dodge Ram pulled up. A woman in her 50s was driving, silver hair, brown skin, bright pink shirt that said "Jesus is my co-pilot." She looked at me like she already knew. "You saw the car, didn't you?" she asked, voice dry and calm. I couldn't even talk. I just nodded. She helped me into the truck, gave me water. We didn't speak until we got back to Eagle Pass, when we reached the gas station on the edge of town. She parked and turned off the engine. "They say it used to be a highway patrolman," she said. "Died chasing a drunk driver, hit a tree doing 100. Some say it was a hit and run. Some say he was chasing someone who didn't exist. Either way, they buried him in his uniform, badge and all. But the car. The car didn't stay buried." I stared at her. "Why me?" she shrugged. "Some roads don't want to let go. And some folks," she paused, looking at me, "some folks are just driving too close to the edge." I never found my truck again. Cops went out there the next day, but there was no trace. No tire marks, no vehicle. Like it had never been there. I quit my job 2 weeks later. Moved in with my brother in San Antonio. I don't drive at night anymore. And I never take 277. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I still hear that horn. And smell burnt oil. And pennies. They say you can still hear it on windless nights when the air sits heavy over the scrubland like a wool blanket soaked in sweat, and even the insects go quiet. Farm Road 1053 runs 30 miles northwest of Monahans, cutting through a dry, sun-blistered stretch of West Texas where only mesquite and ghosts thrive. Out there, tucked back from the road behind a line of weather-shattered barbed wire, stands the barn. Or what's left of it. The structure leans to one side like it's been punched in the gut, its wood slats bleached gray by decades of sun and sand, the roof sagging in on itself. At first glance, it looks like a ruin, no more threatening than an old dog asleep in the dirt. But the locals know better. They call it the Screaming Barn, and no one who lives within 50 miles will go near it after sundown. Back in 2003, when I was still working for the oil field inspection crew out of Pecos, I took that road every week, heading out to survey inactive pumps and check environmental safety markers. I'd driven past that barn maybe a dozen times before I even noticed it. That part of Texas is so flat and empty that strange things can hide in plain sight, sunken into the land like bruises. One day, around dusk, I saw the roofline peeking over the horizon as I passed mile marker 34. The sight of it did something strange to me. I felt an almost magnetic pull, like it wanted me to notice it. I asked around town that night, sitting at a diner just off the Monaghan's exit. The waitress, a leathery woman named Barb who'd probably smoked since the womb, froze when I brought it up. She was topping off my coffee and stopped mid-pour. "You don't want to mess around out there," she said, voice low. "That place ain't." "Right. What is it? Just some old cattle barn?" "Used to be," she said, "back before my time, belonged to the Greaves family. Had some land out there. Cattle, goats. They vanished in '59, every last one of them. Sheriff found the place empty. Doors all open. Food still warm on the stove. Animals gone, even the dogs. No blood. No struggle. Just ... gone." She lit a cigarette right there in the diner, and no one told her to stop. A month later, folks started hearing it. The screaming, like people being burned alive, but worse, deeper. I asked her if anyone had gone to check it out. She nodded. Couple dumbass kids went there back in the '80s. One came back blind in both eyes. Said he saw a mouth open in the floor. Not a real mouth, just ... shaped like one. Said it whispered. To him. Other kid disappeared. Sheriff tried to find him. Spent the whole night out there. Next morning he was sitting on the hood of his cruiser, shaking. Wouldn't speak for 2 days. When he did, he just said, "There's something in the ground." That was all. I laughed nervously. She didn't. I wish I'd listened. 2 weeks later, I was back on 1053, headed out to inspect an abandoned storage site near the state line. The sun was already setting, casting a bloody orange across the land. I saw the barn again. I wasn't planning to stop, but the truck sputtered check engine light flashing red and coasted to a dead stop right by that cursed stretch of fence. I sat there, sweating, fiddling with the ignition. The nearest tow was 30 miles off and I had no cell signal. So I got out. The wind had died completely. Not a single sound. No bugs, no birds, just dead air. The barn stood maybe 200 yards from the road. A thin trail cut through the dusty field, old and forgotten but visible. My boots crunched on the dry ground as I walked. Something happened about halfway there. My ears started ringing. Not like pressure, more like someone whispering too close to my brain. But there was no voice, just a tone, low and insistent. It made me dizzy. I should have turned back. But I didn't. I wish I had got up close. The barn was bigger than I'd thought. The wood was gray and splintered. The boards warped like something had pushed from inside. The double doors were cracked open just enough to show darkness beyond. Real darkness. Not the absence of light, but something deeper, like the dark was waiting. I stood there, sweating, feeling a sick cold crawling up my spine. And then I heard it, not a scream at first. A moan, low and hollow, like it had started at the center of the earth and was clawing its way up. It vibrated through the ground, through my boots, into my bones. I froze. Then it grew louder. It didn't sound human. Not really, but not animal either. It sounded like grief had grown teeth. A howling wall of pain and rage in something older. It got so loud I clapped my hands to my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't in the air, it was in me. I stumbled back. I must have tripped, because I hit the ground hard, biting dust. That's when I saw it. The earth beneath the barn shifted. Not visibly, not like dirt moving, but my mind knew it was shifting. Something was under there. Something aware. The ground bulged slightly, like it was breathing. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. My body wouldn't respond. Then the door creaked out just a hair, just enough for a sliver of black to spill out darker than night. Inside, I saw a shape. Not a person, not an animal, just a shape, wide and tall and wrong. It wasn't moving, but it was looking. I couldn't see eyes, but I knew it saw me. It said something, not in words, not in sound, but in a pressure behind my eyes, a concept that entered my mind like a splinter. It was hungry. And not for food. I don't remember running, but I came to lying in the middle of Farm Road 1053, gasping like I'd been underwater. My truck was idling beside me, headlights cutting through the dust. I never touched the keys. I don't know how it started. I left everything: tools, clipboard, inspection forms. I drove straight to the Monaghan Sheriff's Office and told them. What happened? The deputy looked at me like I was drunk. Then the sheriff walked in, same one from the stories, only now in his 60s. Tall, sun-worn face, eyes dull like wet ash. He listened, quiet the whole time. When I finished, he sighed and nodded. You saw it too. What is it? I asked. He shook his head. It don't have a name. Some places are just thin. And some things ain't meant to be buried. When they built that barn, they dug too deep. Found something that should have stayed asleep. Now it's got roots. I asked if they'd ever tried to destroy it. Tried burning it once. In '72, fire wouldn't catch. We even dropped diesel on it. Wood smoked, but it didn't burn. Like it was already dead. He offered no comfort. No explanation. Just told me not to go back. I didn't. I changed jobs, moved east, got out of that whole region. But I still hear it sometimes, in dreams. That screaming. That thing in the ground. And every now and then, someone on the news goes missing out there. Tourists, drifters, someone just trying to get off the main highway. They always say the same thing. The truck was found. Engine running, driver's door open. No footprints leading away. If you ever take 1053 west of Monaghan's, don't stop for anything. Don't look toward the fence line. And whatever you do, never, ever open that door. Whispers on Possum Kingdom Road. It was a 2-lane blacktop winding through the mesquite scrub and low hills west of Graham, Texas. The kind of place you'd only know if you were from the area or had the misfortune of taking a wrong turn after dark. Locals called it Possum Kingdom Road because it snaked down to the lake by the same name, but the stretch people talked about quietly. In gas stations and small-town barbershops was about 3 miles of cracked asphalt running between two abandoned farmsteads where the trees leaned too far over the road and cell service dropped off entirely. Back in the early 2000s, it was the spot for teenage hookups, a forgotten place shielded by thick brush and the occasional rusted-out fence. At night, pickup trucks and hand-me-down sedans would pull off into the gravel clearings at the edge of the woods. Headlights off, music low, windows cracked. The girls always complained about the mosquitoes, and the boys always forgot to bring repellent. It was a Texas rite of passage summer heat, the scent of cedar and cigarette smoke, the occasional hoot of an owl or rustle of an armadillo in the leaves. But something changed around 2009. People still went there for a while, but the stories started trickling in. First, it was just a joke, kid saying they heard a weird sound under the car, like a dog growling or someone whispering gibberish. They'd laugh it off. But then came the ones who swore up and down they heard voices, their own voices. Not echoes, not memories. Real time, repeated back at them with just enough delay to twist the words into something wrong. Like a skipping record trying to learn human speech. In September of that year, a girl named Lisa Garrett came back from a night at Possum Kingdom Road shaking so bad she couldn't hold her cigarette. She told her older brother that she and her boyfriend Kyle had been parked out there for less than 20 minutes when they started hearing someone talking under the car. First, it was their names. Then it was Kyle saying something like, "You smell good," in this goofy tone he used, and then the same words repeated from under the car, not quite right. A beat behind, lower, rasping like it came through water or a busted speaker. Kyle thought it was a prank. He got out with a flashlight, looked around, checked under the car. Nothing. No tracks. No animals. They left right after that, but Lisa said the voice kept following them, not outside, but from inside the car, whispering from under the seats. Just quiet enough to doubt it was real. Just loud enough to keep her from sleeping that night. By winter, nobody parked there anymore. Grew up in Graham, and I remember hearing about Possum Kingdom Road like it was just another ghost story. People always need a place to hang their fears. But I was 25 when I came back home for a few months to help my dad after his second heart attack, and I decided to see the place for myself. I don't know what I expected. Probably nothing. I was bored, lonely, and a little too eager to remind myself I wasn't a kid anymore. Afraid of local legends. It was early December. The nights got cold fast out there, and you could see your breath as soon as the sun dipped below the trees. I drove my dad's old Silverado out toward the lake around 10 at night, taking the back way through the hills. No traffic, no lights, except for the dash glow and occasional glint of deer eyes in the brush. The road looked just like I remembered, cracked and patchy, edges swallowed up by creeping grass and bramble. After a while, the trees started getting thicker, growing too close to the shoulder, like they'd been pushed there by something unseen. I pulled off into one of the old clearings, just wide enough for a truck. Killed the engine. The air was sharp and dead quiet. No crickets, no wind. I left the window down an inch and waited, breathing in the cold. It was 20 minutes before anything happened. Long enough for me to start feeling ridiculous, sitting there in the dark like some wannabe ghost hunter. I was about to start the truck when I heard it soft and scraping, like someone brushing their hand along the undercarriage. Just once. Then silence. Then again, but longer, dragging. I froze, leaned slightly toward the window, trying to listen without moving too much. My breath fogged the glass. Then a voice. From under the truck. "What are you doing out here?" I blinked. The words were mine. I had said them maybe 10 minutes earlier, muttering to myself. But this voice was slower, slurred at the edges, like it came from a mouth that didn't quite know how to shape sounds. It didn't echo. It imitated. Like something trying to learn me. I held my breath. Stupid story. It said next, again in my voice, but off-kilter, like it came from a damaged recording. Probably just some old story. I hadn't realized I'd said that too. But I must have. My voice warped. Practicing. Then something bumped the bottom of the truck hard. Enough to rock the frame just a little. I scrambled for the keys, started the ignition with shaking hands, and gunned it back onto the road, gravel spitting out behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't slow down until I saw the lights of town. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, with the space heater humming beside me, I tried to convince myself it was an animal. A prank. Something explainable. But at 2:47 a.m., I heard a whisper from under my bed. "What are you doing out here?" The exact same voice. Same wrong inflection. Same rasp. It was followed by silence so complete it pressed on my eardrums. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I left the next day and didn't go back for almost 3 years. Since then, I've talked to others, people who've heard it too. Some got followed like I did. Some only heard it once. And only a few said it went further. They started hearing more than just their own voices. They heard family members, friends, dead loved ones. Sometimes in the middle of the night. Sometimes while driving. One man I spoke to, a retired sheriff's deputy, Told me he parked out there back in 1998. He never heard anything that night. But 2 weeks later, while sitting on his porch, he heard his daughter's voice from under the deck. She died the year before in a wreck on Highway 380. He said it wasn't her exactly, more like a copy of her voice, practiced and hollow. It said, "Daddy, I miss you," over and over, just a little different each time. The last version was barely a whisper, almost insectal. He drank himself sick that night. Never told anyone until I came asking. I don't know what it is on Possum Kingdom Road. Some folks say it's an old spirit, something drawn to memory, to emotion. Others say it's not from here at all. Not ghost, not demon. Just something ancient. And wrong, echoing what it hears to see what sticks. Like a mimic bird with too many teeth. But whatever it is, it remembers what it hears. And it keeps it. Tries it on like a skin. And every once in a while, you'll hear a voice where it doesn't belong, under a truck, behind a wall, from inside a closet, and you'll realize it's something you said once when you thought no one else was listening, and now it knows you. The road between Uvalde and Bracketville isn't much of a road at all, more like a forgotten scar of old asphalt, buckled from too many summers and patched too many times by too few hands. It's the kind of stretch that doesn't show up on most GPS systems, a shortcut used by ranchers, deer hunters, and folks who want to avoid the main drag for one reason or another. Locals call it the old FM 246. Though even that designation seems like a leftover from a map that's long since been burned. Frank Mercatho took it often, usually late, usually alone. He worked maintenance at Laughlin Air Force Base and sometimes pulled overtime shifts fixing AC units or generators. He lived in a small, dented trailer on the outskirts of Bracketville and kept to himself. Had been that way since his wife died in '09. Every other night, around 10:30 or so, Frank would head home along that empty stretch, sipping on coffee from a thermos and listening to Tejano music on an old FM station that only came in clear south of Sabinal. It was early November when the stop sign first appeared. Frank had driven that road hundreds of times. He knew every turn, every dip where the water gathered after a storm, every faded cattle crossing sign. So when his headlights picked up the bright red reflection of a stop sign at a junction that had never had one before, he immediately slowed. Confused, he scanned the area. There was no crossroad, just a barbed wire fence and a thicket of scrub. Oak beyond. No side road, no T-junction. Nothing but dirt and dust. He stopped anyway. That's the part that always stuck with him afterward. He could have ignored it, should have. There wasn't any logical reason to stop. But something about the sign made him feel like he had to. Like it wasn't a suggestion but a command. The moment he pressed the brake and came to a full stop, the engine coughed and died. Frank cursed under his breath, tried the ignition. Nothing. No turnover. No click. He checked the dash. All lights dead. He reached for his phone to call for help. No signal. Not even the faintest bar. The screen remained stubbornly black no matter how many times he mashed the button. At first, he figured it was just bad luck. Maybe the alternator had given out, or the battery had finally decided to die. He popped the hood and climbed out. The silence was immediate and total, the kind that seemed to press in from all sides. Even the bugs were quiet. No wind, no chirp of night birds, no coyotes howling. In the distance, just the slow ticking of the engine cooling in the dead air. He stood there for a while, hood up, staring blankly into the engine compartment, not really knowing what to look for. He wasn't a mechanic, just good at keeping things running with duct tape and guesswork. After a few minutes, he climbed back in the cab and tried the key again. Still nothing. He glanced at the clock on the dash. It had stopped at 10:47. He pulled the thermos from the cue folder, took a sip of cold coffee, and settled in to wait. That was when he saw the figure dotted started as a shadow near the fence line. Not moving exactly, just existing. A space that was darker than the dark. He leaned forward, squinting. Could have been a deer, maybe, or a feral hog. But then it stepped toward the road. Frank's hand froze halfway to the ignition. The figure moved with an awkward, jerking rhythm like a puppet on strings. It had no flashlight, no visible features, just a tall silhouette drifting toward him like a smear of ink. He locked the doors instinctively. It kept coming. Slow and steady. Frank found himself holding his breath. The figure reached the edge of the road and paused. Then it lifted one long arm and tapped once on the driver's side window. Tap. The sound was soft, almost polite. But the force behind it sent a vibration through Frank's whole body. He couldn't move. His limbs were ice. His heart pounded so loud he could barely hear anything else. The thing stood there for what felt like minutes. Then, without another sound, it leaned down, and though the window was fogged slightly from his breath, Frank could swear it pressed something like a face against the glass. But the proportions weren't right. The mouth was too wide, the eyes too low, and the skin looked like paper that had been soaked and dried 100 times. Wrinkled, translucent, gray. Then nothing. Frank blinked, and the world snapped forward, like a tape unpaused. It was morning. The sun was up, birds chirping. He was parked in front of his own trailer. The engine was running. The clock on the dash read 6:03 a.m. For days he didn't talk to anyone. He wasn't sure what to say, what had even happened. He chalked it up to exhaustion, stress, maybe even hallucination. But deep down, he knew it had been real. He tried to forget, avoided that road, took the longer route through the main highway. But a week later, his curiosity got the better of him. He drove back out along FM 246 just before dusk, trying to find the exact spot where the sign had appeared. There was nothing, no stop sign, no crossroad, not even a clear shoulder to pull off onto, just that same empty stretch. But when he pulled over and stepped out, he found something stuck to the side of his truck, a smear of ash, shaped vaguely like a handprint. Word started to spread slowly, mostly through hushed talk at gas stations and after church services. Other people had seen the sign. Truckers, teenagers, a game warden. Some had stories that sounded just like Frank's. Others claimed to have kept driving and felt their headlights die, until they couldn't see the road anymore. One guy said he drove for hours without getting anywhere, the road looping back on itself endlessly, until he turned around and saw the stop sign behind him. The strangest account came from a woman named Trina who worked nights at a diner off Highway 90. She said her cousin had seen the sign and stopped. She got a text from him at 11:02 p.m. that read simply, "I stopped." No one saw him again. His truck was found 4 days later in a dry creek bed 20 miles south, perfectly intact, engine off, doors locked. No sign of him. His phone was on the seat, screen shattered, battery dead. Frank doesn't drive anymore. He sits on his porch most nights, shotgun across his lap, thermos by his side. He watches the road from his gravel driveway, even though you can't see FM 246 from there. Says sometimes, late at night, he hears a tapping sound on his trailer window, just one tap, like a question. He doesn't answer. Nobody knows what the thing is, or why it chooses some and not others. Some folks think it's a government experiment gone wrong, a glitch in reality, or an old curse tied to the land. Others believe it's older than all of that something that was buried when the towns were founded and dug up by accident. But everyone agrees on one thing. If you're driving between Uvalde and Brackettville and you see a stop sign where there shouldn't be one, don't stop. Whatever's waiting for you in that stillness, in that perfect silence, it doesn't care what you are. It just wants you to obey. On the eastern outskirts of Amarillo, beyond the grain elevators and cattle feedlots, FM 1912 cuts a lonely swath through the high plains. The two-lane blacktop runs straight and narrow, bordered by rusted barbed wire and fields that stretch to the flat horizon like the edge of a goddamn canvas. It's a dead road, locals say, not because its unused truckers and oilfield workers still pass through, but because of what it does to people late at night. No one with sense drives it after midnight. And if they do, they sure as hell don't stop. In 2017, a man named Carter Wills was driving back from a construction job in Groom. It was late October, cold and dry, with a stiff wind that pushed tumbleweeds across the road like nervous animals. Carter was tough, 38, thick-necked, and no-nonsense. He'd been in the Army, Iraq. He didn't believe in ghost stories. His buddy Clay, the one he'd been working with that day, had warned him not to take 1912 back to town. "The loop," Clay had said, lighting a cigarette with fingers that shook. "Adds 20 minutes, but it's safe. That baby shit? Ain't a joke." Carter laughed him off. "You need to get some sleep, man." He left Groom around 10:45. By the time he was out past Pullman Road, the traffic had died down completely. Not even a single headlight in the distance. Just endless plains under a silver-slivered moon, silent and still. He cracked the window to stay awake. The wind was sharp, carried a scent of dust, manure, and something else sweet and sour, faint. Like rotting fruit. Then came the sound. It started low, almost a trick of the engine at first. But then it rose just a little into something unmistakable. The thin, shrill cry of a baby. It wasn't music or radio interference. It was a sound that pierced the blood. Human, young, afraid. Carter braked. Not hard, just enough to coast. The sound was coming from somewhere ahead, then to the right. A ditch, maybe. Could have been some poor girl dumped a baby. Crazier shit had happened in the Panhandle. His headlights swept over scrub brush and barbed wire, a culvert, and something in the grass. He pulled over, got out. The wind slapped him in the face as soon as he opened the door. The baby's cry had stopped. The silence was instant, like someone had cut a cord. All he could hear now was the wind in the fence, then something exhaled behind him, not loudly. Not a snort or gasp. Just a breath. A warm, human breath, close enough to stir the collar of his coat. He spun around, fists clenched. Nothing. Not a soul. Just his truck idling, headlights pointed at a dry patch of Johnson grass. He stood there for a minute, breathing hard, then turned back toward the ditch. That's when he saw it, a baby carriage, old, rusted, the kind from the 50s with big spoked wheels and a faded blue hood. It lay on its side in the gully, one wheel still spinning in the wind. A blanket white with yellow ducks was draped. Halfway out, it fluttered slightly. Carter climbed down, hands on his knees. No sign of a baby. But when he touched the blanket, it was warm. Not just from the air. Body warm? He looked around, heart racing now. Something was off. The air felt charged, like static before a storm. His skin itched. He picked up the blanket and then froze. Another sound, a soft, wet click. Like a mouth opening. He turned to the left, scanning the shadows. There was a small tunnel opening under the road, just a drainage pipe. Black, maybe 3 feet high. The sound came from there. Then came the breath again. This time, it didn't wait for him to turn. It came with a voice. "You shouldn't have stopped." Carter staggered back, the blanket falling from his hands. The voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even loud. But it was wrong. It had a strange echo, like it wasn't coming from a throat but from a deeper place, as if the pipe itself had spoken. He backed up the slope, tripped over a chunk of concrete, scrambled upright, and ran to his truck. The breath was behind him. Again, closer now, warm on his neck, but he didn't dare turn. He slammed the door shut, threw it into drive, and peeled off with gravel spitting under the tires. He didn't go home. He drove straight to Clay's place and pounded on the door until his friend answered in his underwear with a "Fow," shotgun in hand. Carter didn't sleep that night. He didn't sleep much at all after that word got around, and folks started to talk about how Carter wouldn't drive at night anymore. He quit his job, started drinking more. 6 months later, he disappeared. His truck was found parked on the shoulder of FM 1912, engine cold, driver's door wide open. Inside was the same duck-patterned blanket, folded neatly on the passenger seat. That was the second disappearance. The first was a teenager back in 2003, Jamie Ridgway. 16, she'd just gotten her license. Her parents said she took FM 1912 to get to her boyfriend's place in Washburn. Never showed. Her car was found in the ditch, keys still in the ignition, headlights on. The driver's door was open, and a small footprint, bare, child-sized, was pressed into the muddy bank. Just one. There've been others. Always at night. Always alone. The pattern is consistent. They hear a cry. They stop. Then something breathes behind them. A man named Boone Harmon, a retired DPS officer who still lives outside Panhandle, swears he saw it once. Back in 1991, he was chasing a speeding truck that blew through a stop sign near Highway 60. Lost him out near FM 1912, pulled over to check his bearings, and heard the same cry. Baby, soft, helpless. He got out, took maybe 3 steps from his cruiser, and then heard something thump against his back window. When he turned, the glass was cracked out, and there, pressed flat against the rear windshield, was a face. Small, pale, mouth open, eyes black and wide. The thing didn't crawl away. It vanished. Like mist. Boone didn't report it. Didn't know how. But he tells the story every now and then at the VFW. Says the face was too perfect. Not human. Like it had been copied from a picture but done wrong. Too smooth. Too symmetrical. Some say it's the ghost of a baby that died out there during the Dust Bowl. A migrant family stranded on the side of the road. Others think it's older. Something that feeds on attention. If you stop for it, it notices you. Follows. Gets closer each time. You don't see it in the mirror. You don't see it behind you. But it's there, just beyond reach. Breathing. A trucker named Eli Ruiz claims he once threw a thermos out the window to drown out the sound of the crying. The next day, his wife found that same thermos standing upright on their front porch. Lid unscrewed, still warm inside. He moved to New Mexico a week later. The county refuses to investigate. There's no budget for ghost stories. No one files official reports anymore. But you can still find them online forums, late-night radio, even a YouTube video that supposedly shows a carriage rolling across the road with no wind. It's grainy and glitchy, and most people write it off as fake. But locals know better. They say if you're driving FM 1912 after midnight and you hear the infants cry, do not stop. Do not slow down. Do not check your mirrors, no matter how real it sounds, no matter how soft or close it gets, because if you do, it will stop crying and start breathing right behind you. They called it the dead stretch of Loop 1604. You'd know it if you lived around the northwest side of San Antonio, where the highway curves past a dead patch of mesquite brush and limestone outcrops. The asphalt's cracked from decades of heat, and for 10 miles there's barely any shoulder. No gas stations, no lights. No reason to be out there past midnight. But truckers use it to avoid traffic, and teenagers use it to prove something. That they're braver, dumber, invincible. The first dashcam footage showed up in late 2019. A local tow driver, Javier Contreras, was returning from a job in Jolotes when his front camera caught a figure stepping across the road. Not walking, exactly. Flickering, like a hologram caught in static. You could barely see the man's shape, just a vague outline shimmering in monochrome, like he was being tuned in on a broken antenna. In 3 frames he was there, then gone. At first people assumed it was a glitch. Digital noise. Maybe a reflection or some trick of the light. But when Javier uploaded the video to Facebook, it spread fast. Mostly because of what happened to him after. 2 days later, his wife found him in their trailer, bleeding from the eyes. Not dead, just muttering to himself, hands shaking like he was still holding a steering wheel. His pupils were blown wide, like he'd seen something behind the thing he recorded. The paramedics took him to Methodist Texan. They couldn't find anything physically wrong with him. No drugs, no stroke, no seizure. Just sensory overload. He wouldn't stop blinking, even when they gave him sedatives. When he finally spoke, he kept asking why there were TV lines running across his wife's face. After that, more footage turned up. Always late at night, always on that same bend near the Blanco exit. Sometimes it was just static fuzz at the corner of the screen. Other times, a man-shaped interference pattern crossed the road in an inhuman stutter step, like someone was fast-forwarding and rewinding him at once. Every time someone saw the figure, something happened to them. Not immediately, but within days they'd report migraines, vertigo, visual hallucinations. Not the trippy kind, no colors, no shapes, just digital patterns. Interlacing lines, barcodes, flickering fields of noise. It got to the point where some drivers refused to take the loop at night, but there was no official warning, no city alert. Just word of mouth and stories, lots of stories. They called him the Walking Static Man. In February of 2021, I got involved. I was working freelance for a local paper, writing human interest stories, paranormal fluff, that kind of thing. My editor gave me a 2-word assignment, Static Man. No one else wanted to touch it. So I did what I always do, started digging. I talked to a mechanic in Stone Oak who claimed to have seen something like a person right before his car lost power and rolled into a ditch. I tracked down a UTSA student who'd driven the loop for fun with friends. They were filming a YouTube challenge midnight joyride, real original, and caught 5 seconds of a figure with no face. Just ripples of black and white static that distorted the sound in their car mic. She couldn't stop hearing a faint buzzing after that. Had to drop out of her semester. Said she couldn't concentrate, not with the noise always crawling behind her thoughts. The most disturbing account came from a highway patrolman named Ron Driscoll. He retired early after an incident he wouldn't talk about publicly. I met him at a diner off Bandera Road. He was pale, even under the sunburn, with hands that never quite stopped twitching. He didn't look like a man used to being afraid. He didn't want to speak on record. But he asked me if I'd ever seen an analog TV tuned to a dead channel for too long. Said that sometimes, if you stared into the static long enough, it started to take shape. Faces, movements, patterns. Like something was buried inside the noise. Watching back, he told me he'd been called to the loop one night after someone reported a stalled vehicle and possible pedestrian in the road. He got there just after 2 a.m. No vehicle. No person. Just a smell ozone and copper, like the air before a lightning strike, and something wrong with the radio. Every channel fuzzed, then silence. Then a voice, sharp and metallic, like it was squeezed through a narrow pipe, returned to pattern. He didn't remember much after that. Said he woke up in his cruiser 5 hours later, engine off, keys gone. His watch said 2:04 m. That's what stuck with me. That gap. That loop. Everyone kept mentioning loop's time gaps, repeating footage, mirrored vision. It was like the entity, if that's what it was, wasn't just crossing the road. It was repeating itself. Caught in a signal that didn't end dot, so I drove the stretch myself midnight. Clear weather. I had a GoPro on the dash, a handheld EMF reader, and an old analog TV I wired to a battery in the back seat. I figured if this thing was real, maybe it needed analog tech to show itself. Something with a bit of fuzz. Something it could bleed into. Nothing happened for the first hour. I drove back and forth, past the same dead trees and limestone ravines. No cars, no animals. Just me and the hum of tires over cracked blacktop. I started to feel tired. The kind of tired that didn't make sense. Like the road itself was sapping me. Then, on my third pass, I saw him dot. It was less of a sight and more of a presence. A flicker just ahead. My eyes locked onto a vague humanoid form about 30 feet past the next mile marker. I didn't brake. Didn't swerve. I couldn't. My hand stayed locked. Like my body knew better than I did. In 3 frames, he crossed the road. Not walking, not gliding. More like being dragged across invisible film, his limbs jittering out of sync with themselves, his form flickering in and out. I swear to God I could see the inside of him at one point, like an X-ray pulled through a blender. He vanished. My dashcam shut off. So did the TV in the back. For 5 seconds there was silence. Then I heard a sound from the back seat. Not a voice. Not breathing. A pulse. Like the tick of a CRT coming online, followed by static. Not from the TV. From me, my ears. My eyes. I stopped the car and stumbled out, vomiting on the shoulder. My vision was full of scan lines. Not figuratively, literally. Black and white interference cut through everything. I saw the real world behind a filter I couldn't remove. And underneath it, faces. Faces watching, judging, frozen in the fuzz. That was 6 months ago. I haven't driven since. I see static in mirrors now. Hear faint tones before I fall asleep, like a number station repeating broken sequences. The worst part is, I think I understand him now. The static man, he's not a ghost, not a man, he's a recording. A playback stuck in an endless loop. Some echo of a person who got caught in the wrong kind of transmission. Maybe a trauma so loud it bled into signal forever. Or maybe something older. Something that wants to be recorded. Something that needs viewers. I found police reports from 1987. A man hit by a car on that same stretch. The driver swore he saw someone already standing in the road, so he swerved and hit the second man by accident. The first figure was never found. Witnesses described flickering headlights, brief engine failure, and migraines afterward. That was before digital anything, before cell towers, before dash cams. He's always been there. He's waiting in the loops. And now he's in mine. Some roads are bad luck. Locals whisper about potholes that swallow cars or deer that stare too long from the tree line. But there's a 2-mile stretch west of Llano, Texas, that folks mostly avoid talking about. It's not marked on any map. Differently. It looks like any other stretch of FM 152 cracked asphalt winding through mesquite and live oak, a rusty fence line on the left and brittle pasture grass on the right. But the ones who've been on it know. You know, because you see the same black mailbox, dented on the side and leaning slightly westward, every few minutes no matter how fast or slow you drive. Marcus Brody didn't believe any of that. His wife, Kelly, liked to read strange stuff on Reddit, horror subreddits, and Texas folklore forums. She told him the story about the looping road after dinner one night in late August. laughing while she read it aloud, but Marcus had just shaken his head and gone back to his beer. Why would anyone believe this crap? He muttered, flipping channels. Still, when they made the drive from Fredericksburg to San Saba a week later, Kelly made a point of mentioning the detour that would take them through Llano. We'll just be passing through. It's not like we're going to find your spooky mailbox, she said, grinning, but Marcus noticed she kept glancing at the road signs as they got closer. Their girls, Emily, 11, and Sophie, 7, were asleep in the back seat, their legs tangled, sharing a tablet that had long since died. The sun was a burning coin sinking low, casting gold light across the land and shadowing the barbed wire fences until they looked like cracks in the earth. Marcus didn't think much of it when the first mailbox appeared. It was just off the right shoulder, black, rust-stained at the edges, the number 1131 barely legible under peeling white paint. 10 minutes later, it appeared again. Same dent, same tilt, same patch of purple thistle at its base. Didn't we pass that already? Kelly asked, frowning. Marcus didn't answer. He slowed the SUV a little and glanced around. The scenery was identical scrub grass, barbed wire, twisted oaks, but that wasn't strange. Hill country all looked the same out here. Then the girls started waking up. Emily yawned and stretched, then frowned at the window. Didn't we already go by that mailbox? She asked. Marcus said nothing. He kept driving, but the air in the car had changed. There was a weight to it, something thick and wrong that settled around their shoulders like wet blankets. Kelly reached for her phone to check the GPS. The screen flickered. Then the blue dot froze. No signal, she murmured, tapping it. It says we've been on FM 152 for 20 minutes. That can't be right. This stretch isn't that long. The mailbox came again. This time, Marcus stopped the car. He stepped out onto the road, the heat of the asphalt radiating through his boots. The air smelled dry and bitter with a hint of burnt oil. He walked to the mailbox. It was real cold to the touch, rusting at the hinges. He opened it. Empty dot behind him. Kelly got out too, shading her eyes. We turned off 16 about 20 minutes ago, she said. We should have hit Highway 87 by now. This road doesn't go on forever. Marcus shut the mailbox and looked down the road. It stretched out ahead, unbending and straight, shimmering in the heat. No signs, no other cars. Just flat land and silence. Let's go, he said tightly. They passed the mailbox again 5 minutes later. Emily started crying quietly. I think we're stuck, she whispered. No, Marcus said, too loud. It's just a weird stretch, a trick of the land. But Kelly's voice shook when she said, I read something on that Reddit thread. People said this happened before. There were rules, things you had to say or do. Marcus gripped the wheel. That's nonsense. The girls began to cry harder, and Sophie spoke in that quiet, distant tone young children get when something is truly wrong. It doesn't like when you don't believe. What? Kelly asked, twisting in her seat. Sophie stared straight ahead, her little hands clenched in her lap. It gets mad when you don't believe in it. That's why it keeps us. It likes the ones who are scared. But it won't let you. Go until you say its name. Kelly's face drained of color. Sweetie, whose name? I don't remember, Sophie said. But I almost do. The road twisted subtly. Marcus didn't notice it at first, but the turn was new. The map still didn't show any change, but the landscape had altered. The grass looked grayer, more brittle. The sky had deepened, unnaturally dark for the time of day. The mailbox returned. This time, Marcus didn't stop. He pressed the gas harder. They drove faster. 50, 60, 70. The road stayed flat and clear, and no matter how fast they moved, the mailbox returned, like a silent heartbeat. Emily screamed when she saw it the sixth time. Sophie had gone quiet again. I almost remember, she said. Kelly reached back and grabbed her hand. Sophie, baby, please. We need to know. You said. It had a name. It told me, Sophie whispered, in the car. While we were asleep. It was riding under the road. Kelly turned slowly to Marcus. What the hell does that mean? Marcus shook his head. I'm turning around. He spun the wheel hard and made a U-turn in the middle of the road. They drove the opposite direction. 5 minutes later. No. Marcus breathed. The mailbox hadn't moved. The road hadn't changed. We're not going anywhere, Kelly said. We're not on a road anymore. Not really. Then something scratched across the windshield. A flicker of motion long and low, like fingers brushing glass. Marcus slammed the brakes. The thing was gone. Nothing there. Just the mailbox. Ahead again. Sophie leaned forward. Her voice was flat. It's called Harrow. That's its name. Nobody spoke. The air inside the SUV seemed to twist slightly, like heat mirage forming in the cold. Then everything shifted. The road curved. For the first time, they hadn't seen a curve in over an hour. The mailbox did not appear. Marcus pulled the car over, his hands shaking. Kelly checked her phone. The GPS had moved. The signal had returned. They were 10 miles east of Lano. They didn't speak the rest of the drive. Later, they would try to remember what Sophie had said. She never repeated it. She didn't even seem to recall saying it. She grew quiet for the next few days, withdrawn. Then one night, she woke up screaming about fingers under the floorboards. They moved away the next year, and sometimes, when Marcus dreams, he's still on that road. Driving. Watching the mailbox appear. Again and again. Waiting for the name he no longer remembers. It started, as most stories around Copper's Cove do, with a whisper no one wanted to acknowledge out loud. People in that part of Central Texas don't take kindly to tales of ghosts or curses. They'd rather fix their eyes on the dirt and pretend nothing out of place ever happened. But if you linger long enough, if you talk to the right people in the right gas stations over the right kind of silence, you'll hear them talk about the stretch of FM 116 that cuts through the woods, just outside of town, the part where the trees press in too close, the road tilts a little too much to the left, and the nights hum with something that's not quite the wind. They call it Clapper's Hollow. Not officially, of course. The road signs still read normal, no warning, no folklore scrawled in marker. But ask any local, and they'll tell you not to drive that stretch after dark. And if you do, for God's sake, keep your windows rolled up and don't look to your left. The first time I heard the story, I was 6. My cousin Trevor had stolen one of Uncle Don's beers and was sitting on the back porch, lit up by the yellow bug zapper and trying to sound older than he was. He said a trucker came through one night and heard something strange just as he hit that narrow bend in the road, where the forest closes in and the blacktop goes rough under your tires. Said the trucker slowed down because he thought he heard. Applause. Not a crash or a bark or anything natural. Applause. Slow. Deliberate clapping right next to the driver's side window. Of course, I didn't believe it. Even at 6, I knew the difference between a scary story and something real. But Trevor leaned in close, eyes wide, and whispered. He looked over, just for a second. Said he saw 2 white-gloved hands floating next to his rig, clapping. Just hands. No arms, no body. Clapping like they was proud of something. Years went by. I moved away. Did what I could to forget that little town, those strange tales. But something always drew me back. Family funerals, holidays, unfinished business. It was during one of those reluctant returns, the summer after my mother died, that I drove the hollow at night for the first time in over a decade. I'd been drinking, but not enough to see things. Enough to dull my nerves, maybe, to convince myself that I didn't need to take the longer route through Lampasas. I figured if I just kept my eyes on the road, I'd be fine. I didn't believe in the clapping. I really didn't single quotes T. It was just past 11 when I hit the edge of the hollow. My old Toyota rattled like it always did, the headlights barely cutting through the thick dark. Trees arched overhead like ribs, skeletal and still, and the heat off the pavement shimmered in strange ways. I rolled up the windows just in case, turned down the radio, and gripped the wheel tighter than I should have. The first clap came about halfway, through soft, barely audible over the hum of the engine. I thought it might have been a branch hitting the glass. I glanced sideways, nothing. Just shadow and trees and the smear of moonlight on the hood. Then another. Closer this time. Clearer. A dry, flat clap, like leather on leather. Then another. Slower. I kept driving. 60 miles an hour. The noise stayed with me, right at ear level, as if someone were running beside the car. I felt it in my chest. The sound didn't make sense. There was no wind, no pattern, just those slow, rhythmic claps, like someone applauding a show only they could see. And then I looked. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the part of me that never stopped being a 6-year-old boy on the porch, daring the dark to prove itself real. They were there. 2 white gloves, pristine and pressed, floating beside my window, clapping slowly. Not hands from a costume or mannequin, but real gloves, the kind you'd see on a magician or a mortician. They moved on their own, palms meeting in perfect, deliberate sync, inches from the glass. I couldn't see anything holding them, no wrists, no strings. Just gloves, suspended in the air like they belonged there. I nearly swerved off the road. Slammed my foot on the gas. The gloves stayed beside me for maybe 5 seconds more, then vanished, just blinked out, like a light being turned off. The silence that followed was worse. Heavy, like something pressing down on my skull. I didn't tell anyone. Not right away. What could I say? Hey, remember that old story? It's real. I saw it. No, you keep that kind of thing locked up. You bury it under work and sleep and noise, but the hollow didn't let go. Weeks later, I heard about the biker. He was from out of town San Marcos or Waco, depending on who you asked. Rode through Copperas Cove on his way to a rally. Never made it. His bike was found off FM 116, 20 feet into the woods, front wheel twisted like a corkscrew. No sign of the man. No blood, no skid marks. Just the bike, the helmet perched neatly on the seat, and a set of white glove imprints on the road, as if someone had clapped right into the asphalt and left. Fingerprints. That's when I started looking deeper. The clapping's been heard for decades. First reports go back to the 1940s. A school bus driver claimed he heard someone clapping outside his window and saw gloves trailing the vehicle. Said he thought it was a prank until one of the kids went missing a week later. Just vanished during recess. Left her shoes under the jungle gym. A mailman in the 60s reported the same thing. Said he drove that road every day for years. Never heard a thing until one morning in October when the clapping started and didn't stop. He stopped delivering after that. Quit his job, moved to New Mexico. His brother said he stopped sleeping. Altogether, most people think it's just urban legend. Something to scare teenagers. But not everyone laughs. Old man Forrester, who used to own the gas station near the hollow, told me once that the hands don't clap for everyone. Just the ones who carry something with them. Guilt, regret, secrets they won't let go of. He said they're not there to scare you. They're there to judge you. And when they clap, it's because you deserve it. There's no pattern to the disappearances. Sometimes it's weeks between sightings, sometimes months. But every person who's ever seen the hand says the same thing. That feeling of being watched, followed, measured. And that sound, those cold mocking claps, echoing like the final scene of a play only you were meant to perform in. Last week, I got a call from a kid I used to coach in baseball. Said he'd been driving that same stretch, coming home from Killeen. He heard it too. Told me he rolled down his window just to check, just to make sure it wasn't his imagination. Now he's missing. His truck was found idling on the side of the road. Door wide open. Engine still running. No sign of struggle. Just 2 white glove prints smeared on the hood, like someone leaned down to get a better look. I don't sleep much anymore. I hear things at night. Soft thumps like clapping from the tree line behind my house. I tried recording it once, nothing came through. Just static. But I hear it, and I think maybe the hollow doesn't end where the trees do. Maybe it's bigger now. Maybe it follows the ones who've seen it. I don't drive that road anymore. But sometimes, when I'm up late and the house is quiet, I swear I can hear it again, soft, slow clapping. Right outside my bedroom window. And once, just once, I looked. They say if you drive the old Farm to Market Road 979 north of Waco around midnight, when the air is thick and still and your headlights barely cut through the fog that hangs like breath over the asphalt, you might see it an old school bus. Dull yellow like a bruise, crawling ahead of you at exactly 30 miles an hour. The windows are mostly dark, the paint flaking in long curls off the sides, tires bald and groaning against the road. No markings, no school district name. Just a shape in the dark, moving without lights, as if it doesn't need to see where it's going. People in the small towns out that way, Calvert, Bremond, even a few in Hearn, have whispered about the bus for decades. You hear the same story with different details. Always around midnight, always the same bus, always the same little girl in the very back seat, her face pale in the gloom, her eyes following you. She doesn't wave, she doesn't blink. She just stares as the bus rounds a curve and disappears, no matter how fast you try to follow. Most folks who see it once don't talk about it again. And those who do, well, they tend to come apart slowly, like a shirt whose seams start unraveling thread by thread until one day there's nothing holding it together. I never believed any of it, not really. I figured it was just one of those Texas ghost stories people tell when they're drunk or trying to scare teenagers into staying off the back roads. I was a mechanic down in Marlin, about a half hour south of Waco, and I'd been working on diesel engines since I was 17. My shop sat between a feed store and a taxidermy place, and I kept the lights on fixing tractors, delivery trucks, school buses, you name it. There's not much else to do in Marlin unless you like fishing or spending your nights drinking warm beer behind the Valero. But last October, I got a visit from a man named Carl Denson. He drove up in a beat-to-hell Dodge Caravan, the kind with one of the doors jammed shut and duct tape holding the rear window together. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks, pale, red-rimmed eyes, hollow cheeks, a tremor in his hands. That made the keys rattle when he fumbled them from the ignition. He said his engine was knocking, maybe the fuel injector or timing chain. He didn't care. He just needed me to get it running long enough to leave Texas. Said he was heading to Arizona, maybe California, somewhere dry, somewhere quiet. I got him a cup of coffee and asked what he was running from. Should have kept my mouth shut, but there was something about the way he looked like he was afraid. The shadows were going to reach out and touch him if he sat still too long. Carl told me about the bus. Said he'd seen it on FM 979 2 weeks earlier. He'd been visiting his cousin near Hammond and took the wrong road after dark, trying to get back to Highway 6. Saw the bus just ahead of him, crawling along without lights. Thought maybe it had broken down or was part of some weird after-school program. He sped up to get around it, but every time he got close, it would round a bend and be gone. Then the dream started. Said he'd wake up sweating, hearing kids giggling behind the walls of his trailer. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they screamed. Other times they whispered things he couldn't understand, like words spoken underwater. He tore the walls out with a crowbar. Said he found a plastic lunchbox sealed inside one, and inside that a handful of teeth, tiny and white and sharp as glass. I told him he should see a doctor. He told me I should mind my own goddamn business. After he left, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. I grew up not too far from FM 979, and I remembered an accident that happened out there when I was a kid back in '91, I think. A church group from Waco had taken a bus full of kids out to a lake retreat near Franklin, and on the way back, they'd taken a wrong turn. The bus veered off a bridge and went into the Navasota River. It was late at night and the driver was drunk, 23 dead, including the pastor and his wife. I remembered my parents talking about it in hushed voices. The local papers ran the story for a week. Then it vanished. I started asking around. The accident wasn't in any of the online archives. No death records, no lawsuits. It was like it never happened. The only thing I found was an old newspaper. Clipping in the Falls County Library, yellowed and crumbling in a file marked miscellaneous. No photos, just names and a short article about mechanical failure and unforeseen tragedy. The weird thing was, the name of the church wasn't listed. The next Friday, I drove out to FM 979 just before midnight. I told myself I was curious, that I didn't believe in ghost stories, that I just wanted to see if the bus was real. I packed a thermos of coffee and parked on the shoulder just past an old pecan orchard, where the road curves near a dry creek bed. I waited with the engine off and the windows cracked. Around 12:17, I saw headlights flicker across the horizon, except they weren't headlights. They were reflections, moonlight catching on glass. The bus came into view like it had been painted. Into the landscape, a slow-moving smear of yellow and rust gliding through the night. It didn't make a sound. No engine noise, no tires on gravel, no rattle of old parts. Just silence and motion. I turned my key and pulled out behind it. Kept my lights off. Stayed 20 yards back. There was a girl in the rear window. Couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. Long dark hair. White dress, maybe lace. Her face was pale and still, not sad, just watching. I rolled down my window and tried to call out. My voice came out thin and dry, like it didn't belong to me. The bus turned around a bend near a cluster of cedar trees and vanished. Not sped up, not faded. Just gone. When I got home that night, my living room smelled like river water thick. Muddy and sour. There were wet footprints leading from the back door to the kitchen. I don't own a dog. I live alone. The dream started 3 days later. I hear them at night, children, dozens of them, all around me. Some are laughing, some are crying. One voice whispers right into my ear. I can't make out the words, but it makes my skin crawl. Once I heard a song, something slow and off-key, like a lullaby sung through broken teeth. I wake up with dirt under my nails and scratches down my back. I boarded up my windows, put salt across the thresholds. Doesn't matter. The bus comes anyway. I saw it parked outside my shop last week, right under the sodium light. Just sitting. There, engine dead, no driver, no movement. The girl was there, same seat, same stare. I don't sleep anymore. I drink until I black out. Doesn't stop the dreams. I found a child's shoe in my truck yesterday, tied neatly and soaked through. I burned it. Came back this morning. Same shoe. Dried this time. I've talked to others. Quiet people, eyes like Carl's, too scared to say the full thing out loud. We've all seen it. We're all haunted by it. One man from Chilton said he tried to touch the bus once, laid his hand on the side as it passed. Said his fingers rotted black over the next week. Doctors amputated up to the wrist. They couldn't explain it. There's a boy in Groesbeck who hasn't spoken since he saw the girl wave at him. His parents say he just sits in his room drawing pictures of the bus. Hundreds of them. One drawing showed the inside full of kids, all with their heads turned backward. I think the bus wants something. Or maybe it's a doorway, a trap, a punishment. It's not random. It shows itself to people carrying something heavy: grief, guilt, anger. Like it feeds on the rot inside us. I tried to leave Texas last week. Got as far as Abilene. The road kept looping, every sign pointing me back east. I saw the girl in the back seat of a pickup truck in the parking lot of a diner. She didn't blink. I turned around and drove home. I can't go far now. I think it's waiting for me to brake. And when I do, I know the bus won't disappear around the bend. Not this time, it'll stop. The doors will open, and I'll get on. The fog rolled in thick just past Elgin, wrapping the two-lane stretch of Highway 290 in a muffled gray silence that seemed to deaden the hum of her tires. Grace had driven this road 100 times, usually to visit her sister in Houston or to get away from her small, stale apartment in Austin. It wasn't unusual for weather to turn like this. Texas could flip moods like a coin, but the fog tonight felt different. It clung to the windshield in wet streaks no matter how fast the wipers swept. The headlights barely pushed through, and the beams lit up only 30 feet ahead before being swallowed whole. She leaned forward, hands tight on the wheel, eyes narrowed. Her phone had no signal. She had checked 3 times already. The radio crackled with static, and even the occasional voice on AM stations sounded distant, tinny, like they were broadcasting from underground. Just past Bastrop, it happened. A pair of headlights emerged from the fog on the opposite side of the highway, weaving slightly like the driver had been drinking or fallen asleep. Grace slowed, heart quickening. The lights came closer, then veered hard off the road, plunging into the ditch. Her stomach dropped. She pulled over immediately, threw the hazards on, and jumped out, phone in hand, even though it wasn't doing her any good. "Hello?" She called, stepping into the wet grass that squished beneath her boots. The air smelled sour, earthy, her breath fogged. "Hey, are you all right?" She descended into the ditch, flashlight from her phone sweeping over the darkness. Nothing. No car. No tracks. Just crushed weeds slowly straightening up and the sound of her own breathing. She scanned again, certain she hadn't imagined it. She had seen the headlights go off the road. After a few minutes. She climbed back up, unsettled, her clothes damp and sticky. Maybe it had been a trick of the fog, she told herself. Maybe the car had kept going and she'd only thought it had. Veered off. The road looked empty now, stretching into white obscurity in both directions. She got back in and kept driving. 10 minutes later, she saw them again. Headlights in the fog, swerving toward the ditch just ahead of her. This time she slowed to a crawl, watched as they flickered, dipped, then disappeared. She pulled over. Again, got out, and walked toward the edge. Again, nothing. Now her hands were trembling. The phone still didn't have service. She turned it off and on, hoping to reset it, but the screen came back blank of bars. The AM radio was only louder static now, no voices at all. She drove on. Her nerves frayed with each mile. Then, the next. Strange thing. In the rearview mirror, a pair of headlights blinked once slowly, deliberately, then vanished. She slammed on the brakes. Her car skidded slightly on the wet pavement. When she looked back again, the road was empty. Nothing behind her but fog and the faint red reflection of her own taillights on the mist. No engine noise. No movement out, she drove faster after that, trying not to look in the mirror. But she couldn't help it. The headlights returned a few miles. Later, blink, gone. Every time she told herself it must be some other driver, she'd glance back and find nothing there. No car, no lights. Not even the sound of tires. She passed an old gas station on the side of the highway near Giddings, its sign flickering above a boarded-up building. She remembered it used to be open years ago. She had stopped there for a soda on a summer trip with her ex. Now it looked abandoned, with vines growing up the side and the parking lot cracked and weedy. There was a figure standing near the pumps. But as she squinted to see it better, the fog swallowed the place completely and it was gone. The road ahead was deserted. Not another car passed in either direction. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched from the fog itself. She called her sister when she finally got one bar of signal, but the call didn't go through. It rang once, maybe, or buzzed, but then disconnected. She tried again. Nothing. A third time. Voicemail. Her sister's voice sounded hollow and distant, like it was coming from another room entirely. She passed a mile marker. It read 174, but the numbers looked strange, off-center, tilted, like the sign had been replaced recently, but by someone who didn't know what they were doing. More headlights in the mirror. Blink. Disappear. She began talking to herself, muttering under her breath to stay calm. Just get to Brenham. Get a motel if you have to. She couldn't keep driving like this. Her heart wouldn't stop thudding, and her hands felt clammy on the wheel. But when she got to the outskirts of Brenham, it didn't look like she. Remember, the gas stations were dark. The streetlights didn't flicker, they weren't on at all. The big blue and white water tower that usually greeted her with the name of the town in bold letters looked rusted over, almost illegible. She turned down what should have been the main strip, but the buildings looked old or wrong. Not empty. Exactly, just different. Outdated signage. A diner with peeling paint and an old menu board, showing prices that hadn't been real since the 1970s. She passed a movie theater playing a film. She'd never heard of The Hills That Breathe, and a pharmacy with hand-painted letters on the windows. The weirdest thing. Not a single person in sight. No other cars. She got back on 290, heading east. Every few miles, the lights returned. Blink, gone. They didn't get closer. They didn't chase her. But they followed. Always just far enough back that she could see. Them in the mirror. Always blinking once before they vanished. The only place she found open was a truck stop about 20 miles outside Hempstead. Its lights were dim, buzzing overhead, but the door was unlocked. She walked in, relieved to see someone, an older man behind the counter, watching a small portable TV. He looked up as she approached. "Fog's bad tonight," he said. "Yeah," she replied. "I've been seeing these headlights, like over and over, in the mirror. They blink and then vanish." The man didn't speak for a long moment. He turned down the volume on the TV. "You stopped to help them?" Her throat went dry. "Yeah, I thought someone went off the road," he nodded slowly. "That's how it starts. You did right to keep going after that." "What do you mean?" "Folks don't drive that part of 290 after dark, not anymore." "Not since the pileup." Her heart stuttered. "What pileup?" 17 years back. Big fog storm just like this. A drunk driver swerved into oncoming traffic near Bastrop. Set off a chain reaction. 7 cars total. Whole stretch of highway was shut down for 2 days. They pulled out bodies one by one. One of them was a woman who just stopped to help someone she thought was in the ditch. Never found the car she said she saw. Grace felt a chill roll through her that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "You're serious?" The man nodded. "Highway remembers things. Some say the people who died never left. They keep trying to get someone to stop, to look, to join them." She wanted to laugh it off, but the man's eyes didn't blink. They didn't flinch. I don't know what they are, he continued, but I've seen them myself. Always the same. Headlights in the fog. Blink once, disappear. It's a warning. Now, they don't chase you unless you stop too many times. She left without buying anything. Couldn't bear to stay inside any longer. Back in her car, the fog seemed even heavier. The road ahead felt longer, more twisted, and the GPS had stopped updating. It kept rerouting her down old county roads she'd never heard of. Her only choice was to keep going straight. She didn't stop again, no matter how close the lights. God, sometimes they blinked in the mirror just 30 feet behind her. Once, she saw something between the beams, just a flicker. A shape, a long pale face looking through the mist with hollow eyes. She refused to stop, refused to look back again. When she finally reached the outskirts of Houston, dawn was bleeding into the clouds, turning the fog into a pink haze. She could see other cars, billboards, civilization. It felt like she had climbed out of something ancient and hungry. She pulled into her sister's driveway and cut the engine. The car behind her blinked once dot and then didn't vanish. They said the boy's name was Mason, 16 years old, lean as a fence post, with shaggy hair and the kind of acne that made his cheeks look like torn-up asphalt. He didn't speak for almost 5 days after it happened. Just stared at the hospital, ceiling with his mouth slightly open and his eyes unfocused, like he was waiting for something to crawl in. The girl Haley Morton was less lucky. She was gone by the time the sheriff got to the scene. Just gone. Not a drop of blood, not a footprint, not a scream reported by the empty trailer homes that line that stretch of Route 7 near Carbon, Texas. No one heard anything. No one ever did. Route 7 isn't much of a highway. It snakes west out of Carbon, which itself is barely a town anymore. Half the buildings are abandoned. The rest are either gun shops, liquor stores, or auto parts. Places that survive off the occasional stranded motorist. During the day, it's sun-baked and bleak. At night, it's blacker than hell, with no streetlights and only the sound of cicadas and coyotes echoing off the mesquite trees. The night it happened was one of those dry July nights where the air doesn't move, and the stars hang so close to the earth they look like they could burn your skin. According to Mason's parents, the kids were supposed to be heading home from a house party out in Cisco. That puts them on Route 7 around 1:20 a.m. The sheriff's report says their car, a beat-up 2007 Saturn Ion, was found pulled over near mile marker 38. Engine off, keys still in the ignition, both front doors wide open. One of Haley's sandals was in the middle of the road, crushed flat like she'd stepped out of it in a hurry. Or like someone had stepped on it after she was already gone. Mason's story came out in pieces through a mix of therapy sessions and one long, desperate conversation with a Catholic priest that no one could get on tape. But this much was consistent. They saw something cross the road ahead of them. Something pale, thin, and long. Not on its feet. It was dragging itself across the asphalt like it was swimming through dirt, elbows moving in short jerks, head up. Like it was sniffing, no legs moving. Just dragging like the lower half of its body was dead or broken. Its mouth was open the whole time, not screaming. Just open like it was breathing through it. Mason said it smelled the air like a dog catching scent. When Haley saw it, she started crying, not screaming. Crying like she already knew what it was. She kept repeating that it looked like her cousin Jonah, who had drowned 2 years ago at Lake Cisco, said the mouth was the same. Open and wet and stupid. Mason didn't believe her. Thought she was panicking. He got out to check. Said the thing had reached the other side of the road and stopped. When he stepped out of the car, it stood up, said it didn't bend its knees. just straightened like a marionette with strings yanked tight. It was too tall. Mason said that 3 different times. Too tall, like someone stretched a man past the point of nature. Its shoulders popped when it stood. Its arms hung past its hips. Then it just watched him. No eyes he could see, just dark. Holes in the face like eroded stone, the mouth still open. Not making a sound. That's when Mason turned and ran. Didn't even shut the door behind him. Locked himself in the car and shut his eyes. Said he could feel it moving closer even without hearing it. Said the air turned cold through the window like it was breathing fog. He waited. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe 30, then nothing. Just silence. When he opened his eyes, Haley was gone. So was the thing. They searched for 6 days. Brought dogs, drones, volunteers, even a couple of helicopters. Nothing. Not even a ripped shirt. But everyone in Carbon started locking their doors a little earlier. People started reporting weird noises on Route 7. A mechanic named Billy Ward said he saw something in the trees that looked like a person walking on all 4s, but backward. A woman named Darlene Hooper said she saw a pale face pressed against her trailer window in the middle of the night. Her trailer's 10 miles from Route 7. When she opened the door, there was nothing, but the grass outside was flattened like someone had been lying there. Long and narrow dot, an old man who lives just off the highway told the sheriff. It wasn't the first time something like this happened. Said back in the 70s, 2 kids vanished out by the same stretch of road. Said his brother saw something crawling near the bridge out there once, back in '81. A pale thing with a broken walk. Everyone thought he was drunk. The man's brother put a shotgun in his mouth 6 months later. The sheriff chalked it up to dementia. But Mason didn't know about any of that. He didn't even know there was a bridge out there. But he told the priest that's where the thing went. Under the bridge, there's something about Texas highways that doesn't feel right when they go quiet. During the day, they hum with dust. And motion, the endless motion of trucks and wheels and cicadas and tires. But at night, when the engines die and the air stops moving, they feel ancient, older than pavement, older than towns, like something hungry is sleeping under them. Route 7 has that feeling. A few months later, a man named Kevin Lott 23, just back from Fort Hood, was found on the side of the same road, 5 miles down from where Mason and Haley were. He'd driven his pickup into a mesquite tree. They found him sitting against the front bumper, hands over his face, eyes wide open. Not a scratch on him. Just quiet. Took him to the same hospital. He never spoke again. Died of a stroke 6 weeks later. Autopsy said there was no reason for someone that age to have had a stroke. Said his heart stopped and started 3 times in the space of 5 seconds. Like something had spooked him so badly it fried his wiring. The last known report came from a local trucker named Richie Marlowe. He'd been driving out toward Rising Star at about 2 a.m. Said he saw something ahead of him in the headlights. Something white and dragging. Said it smelled like roadkill and burnt hair. Richie didn't stop. Gunned it. Later that night, he crashed through a barbed wire fence trying to get off Route 7. Broke both legs. When they pulled him out of the wreck, he kept screaming that it had looked at him through the dashboard. That it had no eyes, but it looked right at him. Eventually, the town stopped talking about it. There was a fire at the gas station where Haley had bought a drink that night. The sheriff moved away. Mason's parents sent him to live with relatives in Lubbock. But Route 7 stayed. The same, empty, cracked, and waiting. Every once in a while, someone reports something. A pale shape near the ditch. A smell like something buried. A dragging sound late at night. They say if you're driving down Route 7 after midnight and your radio starts to hiss, don't stop. No matter what you see, no matter what you think is in the road, don't stop. They say it's still out there, crawling. And if it stands up, you'll never leave the highway again. It started with the deer. Jake Turner was driving west on Highway 67, just past San Angelo, a little after midnight. He had been on the road for 9 hours, making his way from Dallas to Marfa for a photography gig that probably wasn't going to pay enough to justify the trip. The road was long and flat, barely lit under a half-dead moon, and his playlist had already looped twice. His eyes stung from the monotony of the white lines zipping under the headlights, the silence of the Texas desert pressing in like a weight. Then the deer appeared. It stood perfectly still in the middle of the road, its coat pale and patchy eyes, wide and strangely human-like in the glare of his high beams. Jake slammed on the brakes and swerved hard, tires shrieking as the car fishtailed toward the ditch. The deer didn't move. It didn't even flinch. The back of the car swung out violently, and for a moment he thought he was going to roll. But the tires caught the edge of the pavement, and the car groaned back into a straight line, slowing to a stop just short of a cluster of mesquite trees. Jake sat there, heart pounding, sweat beading on his forehead, even though the AC was still on. He looked up and the deer was gone. He let out a shaky breath and reached for his phone to check the map. No signal, which wasn't surprising out here. He was somewhere between Mertzen and Barnhart, surrounded by nothing but scrubland and low hills. Just him, the highway, and the desert. He took a few more deep breaths, put the car in drive, and eased back onto the road. That was when he saw her. She was in the rearview mirror. At first, it didn't register. Just a shape, a smear of white in the dark, like leftover light from the headlights behind him, which didn't exist. He leaned forward and adjusted the mirror, and that's when he really saw her. A woman, pale-skinned and wet-haired, sitting bolt upright in the back seat. Her eyes were wide open, staring into the mirror, at him. Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Jake whipped his head around to look at the back seat. Nothing. He turned back to the mirror. The woman was still there. She raised her hand. No, not her hand. Her finger. She pointed directly at him, then moved her lips slowly, deliberately. The words were silent, but unmistakable. Jake watched in frozen horror as she mouthed 3 distinct syllables. KCAB ... lick. He blinked. She was gone. Jake slammed the brakes again and twisted around in his seat. Nothing. No one in the car. The back doors were locked. His duffel bag was still there, untouched. He was alone. He sat for a long time, engine idling, staring at the mirror. The desert wind sighed across the highway outside. He didn't want to look into the mirror again, but he couldn't help it. His reflection was wrong. Not obviously. Not at first. But his expression, his own eyes looked a little too wide, too sharp, like a mask of himself, just slightly off. The angle of his jaw was subtly different. His smile, unbidden, began to form without him willing it. In the mirror, he was smiling. But in real life, he was in single quotes to ... Jake turned off the mirror with a jab of his finger and drove on. He reached Marfa around 3:30 a.m., shaking and bleary, his stomach tied in knots. He checked into a cheap motel off the main strip and slept maybe an hour, waking every few minutes to check the mirror above the sink. It always felt like something was just about to appear, just at the edge of his vision, but it never did. The next morning, he told himself it was stress, just a trick of the mind, maybe a migraine or a hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation. He almost believed it, until the barista at the little cafe on Highland Avenue handed him his coffee and gave him a weird look. "You feeling all right?" she asked. He nodded. "Just tired." "You sure? Your eyes, they don't look quite right." He didn't answer, just took the coffee and walked out. Back in the car, the mirror was off, but it didn't matter. The reflection had seeped into something deeper, something internal. He felt different, off balance, like he was a passenger in his own body. The job went badly. His hands trembled when he tried to shoot. He couldn't frame things right. The images came out warped, off color. People refused to pose for him. One woman, a gallery owner named Fiona, flat out asked him not to come back. "There's something around you," she said, backing away from his lens. "Something wrong. I can feel it." By the third day, he stopped sleeping entirely. Every reflective surface became a battleground. He started covering mirrors with towels, smashing them in gas station bathrooms. He ripped the rearview mirror off his windshield and threw it into a dumpster behind a diner in Fort Stockton. But it didn't help. She came back anyway. She didn't need mirrors anymore. Now she appeared in his peripheral vision. In store windows, the backs of spoons, puddles in the street. Always watching, always smiling. Her mouth moved constantly now, even when she wasn't speaking. Like she was chewing on something just behind her lips. Something wet, and worse than seeing her was what started happening to him. The man in the mirror began moving independently. It started small, a blink out of sync, a twitch when he was perfectly still, but it escalated quickly. The reflection would smile when he frowned. It would mouth words he didn't say. It would stare straight at him, unblinking, long after he looked away. One night, in another motel off Highway 67, Jake finally tried to record it. He set up his phone to film the bathroom mirror and sat perfectly still in front of it for 20 minutes. When he played the footage back, the reflection never moved, but he did. At the 11-minute mark, the camera showed him getting up, smiling, and walking out of frame. But he remembered sitting still the entire time. He remembered staring at the mirror, motionless, afraid to blink. He checked the door. It was locked. No sign of forced entry. He was alone, but when he looked in the mirror again, the reflection winked at him. He left that motel at dawn, driving north with no plan, no destination. He just knew he had to get off that highway. Away from Highway 67, away from San Angelo. He drove for hours, his nerves fraying with every mile. And all the while, she followed and reflections, in his dreams, in his thoughts. The last time anyone saw Jake Turner, he was standing outside a gas station in Sweetwater, staring into the chrome hubcap of a parked truck. The attendant said he looked like he was in a trance, smiling, mouthing something backward. When the attendant came back out a few minutes later, Jake was gone. The truck's owner found the hubcap cracked down the center, like something had clawed it from the inside. Jake's duffel bag was still sitting beside the pump, untouched. And his phone, still recording, was later found on a bench near the restrooms. The last video on it was 37 seconds long, a shaky clip of a mirror in a motel bathroom. Nothing moving, just the faint sound of someone whispering backwards. If you reverse the audio, it says, "She lives in the glass. She waits in the dark. Smile back and should take your place." They say if you drive alone down Highway 67, near the junction past San Angelo, and you see a woman in your mirror smiling at you, don't look away. Don't smile back. And for God's sake, don't try to read her lips. Because if you do, next time you check the mirror, it might not be your reflection staring back.